Welcome back. This is a place for quiet stories from the wizarding world. The paths canon never walked, the choices that might have changed everything. Here, we take a single moment and turn it slightly. We follow the consequences slowly, carefully, year by year. If you enjoy these long, immersive journeys into alternate magic, consider subscribing and settling in. Now, let's start. The cottage is broken and full of whispers. Smoke hangs over Godric's Hollow, blue aurora light stuttering against shattered stone and splintered beams, turning the ruin into a flickering battlefield tableau. In the doorway where James Potter died, a black silhouette stands motionless, cloak soaked with ash and night. In his arms, pressed against blood-streaked wool, a baby cries with Lily's eyes. What if the man who carried that child out of the wreckage was not Hagrid, but Severus Snape? What if the most hated spy in the war, the man whose one overheard prophecy had cut through the grief like a knife and set this tragedy in motion, became the only one willing to reach down and pick the boy who lived up out of the dust? What if, on the night everything changed, guilt weighed more than hatred? Auras moved through the ruins in harsh, efficient lines, wands raised, boots crunching over glass and bone dust. Albus Dumbledore stands in the yard, his face carved into something far older than his years, arguing in a low, lethal voice with a shaken Amelia Bones and a furious Alistair Moody. Wills, blood wards, ministry regulations. Petunia Dursley's name glows on a hovering parchment, but Dumbledore's gaze keeps flicking to the dark figure in the doorway, to the way Snape's arms tighten every time the baby whimpers. This is that story, not the tale of a neglected child stuffed in a cupboard under the stairs and surviving in spite of his world, but of a weapon, a ward, and maybe a son forged deliberately in the shadows by the wizarding world's most complicated man. Instead of Privet Drive, imagine Spinner's End, narrow brick, rain-slick cobbles, river fog, and a tiny bedroom lined not with broken toys, but with shelves of potion vials and second-hand spellbooks. What if the spy became a father before he ever truly learned to be a man? What happens when the boy who lived grows up knowing the burn of cauldrons, the discipline of occlumency drills, and the theory of curses explained in a voice that never quite softens but never quite leaves? What if every bedtime story is a lesson in concealment? Every holiday, a reminder that wars are won by preparation, not prophecy. One custody decision, one signature, inked under Dumbledore's unblinking eye, pushed through a reluctant ministry that would rather bury its mistakes than hand them to a former Death Eater. That choice will ripple through Hogwarts politics when Harry walks in wearing Slytherin black instead of Gryffindor scarlet, through the staff room where McGonagall and Snape wage quiet battles over curriculum and control, through the corridors where Draco Malfoy must decide whether the professor's ward is enemy or ally. It will twist ministry power struggles as Cornelius Fudge weighs the optics of the boy who lived raised by a man he once tried to imprison, and as Lucius Malfoy wonders whether Severus is still his creature or Dumbledore's. It will reshape Voldemort's return, because the Dark Lord will not be facing a half-trained schoolboy, but a teenager sharpened in secret by the very double agent he trusts most. In the ruins of Godric's Hollow, none of that exists yet. There is only smoke, and two bodies cooling upstairs, and a baby whose cries are finally beginning to hitch and fade. Snape looks down at the green eyes that have haunted him since he was 16, and for once, his voice is barely more than breath. "I will keep you safe, Lily." The words fall on a dead woman's name. The camera does not follow them. It lingers instead on Harry's face, on the tiny hand fisting in black wool, hinting that safety in Severus Snape's arms may come at a terrible emotional cost. Rewriting the legend, from Dursleys to Dungeon Guardian, rewind the frame, hold on the child in black wool, then pull back to the wider board where old men and older promises decide his fate. November 1st, 1981. The morning after the night, everything changed. The war is technically over, but the air in Hogwarts tastes of smoke and failure. In a circular office high above the sleeping castle, Albus Dumbledore weighs two kinds of protection: the clean geometry of blood wards and the jagged, unpredictable shield of one damaged man's obsession. On parchment, the choice is simple. Petunia Dursley is Lily's blood, the key to runes that would anchor the sacrifice in bricks and mortar in a neat little house the Ministry can understand. Place the boy who lived on Privet Drive, bind the magic to his aunt's reluctant care, and trust that distance will keep Voldemort's scattered followers at bay. It is tidy. It is traditional. It is what canon gave us. But this Dumbledore has just watched Severus Snape fall apart on his office floor. He has heard the way keep him safe cut through the grief like a knife, not as strategy, but as penance. What if, instead of shunting Harry to a cupboard and closing the file, Dumbledore gambles on that guilt? What if he honors the promise he took from a broken spy, rather than the letter of a blood-based theory? So the timeline fractures here, not on a doorstep in Surrey, but in a signed guardianship document Dumbledore slides across his desk, Ministry seals already impressed by his influence. Petunia is informed, not consulted. The Wizengamot mutters, but the headmaster's argument is brutally pragmatic. Who better to hide a living Horcrux than the man already buried inside Voldemort's secrets? Canon Harry grows up under the stairs, counting spiders for company. Punished for magic he does not understand, he learns hunger before hope, silence before questions, and the wizarding world arrives as a letter, not a birthright. In this story, the camera moves instead to Spinner's End, to a narrow, damp sitting room lined not with family photos, but with shelves of chipped vials and second-hand books, whose spines whisper about curses and counter-curses. There is no fairy tale book on Harry's bedside table. There is a dog-eared copy of 1,000 magical herbs and fungi, pressed into his hands because Severus cannot imagine raising a child who does not know the difference between monkshood and wolfsbane. Bedtime stories are case studies from old potions journals. Discipline is precise, controlled, terrifying in its consistency. Affection is almost absent, but safety is absolute. This is that story, a long, slow exploration of obsession and guilt, of whether redemption can grow in a house that still smells faintly of stale beer and resentment. Snape is jailer and shield in one. Harry is both burden and chance at atonement, the living reminder of the dead woman and the dead man. Snape cannot forgive. Where does that lead? To a childhood weaponized by education, to a Hogwarts where Harry walks in already fluent in potions fumes and occlumency drills, to a Dumbledore who must negotiate not with a neglected child, but with his own surrogate weapon turning into a person. The Horcrux War will still come. Voldemort is not done with the boy who lived. But every alliance, every betrayal, every corridor duel will be bent around this one altered choice. And from here, we follow it year by year, through the damp streets of Cokeworth into a very different first ride on the Hogwarts Express, and toward a sorting that may split the castle's loyalties in ways the original war never managed. The choice that broke the Blood Wards. We leave Hogwarts' stone corridors and step back, for a moment, to the night everything changed. Not in Godric's Hollow, but in a quiet Surrey sitting room, where a single vicious choice will decide what protects the boy who lived. Canon gives us one answer. Dumbledore leans on blood and law in their simplest forms. Lily dies for Harry. Her sacrifice settles into his very skin. To anchor that protection, he threads it through Petunia Dursley, the last living Evans, and builds blood wards around number 4. So long as Harry can call that place home, Voldemort cannot touch him. Not a happy home. Just a roof, a name on a form, a technicality. In this story, that technicality breaks. Dumbledore arrives at Privet Drive with a sleeping bundle and a letter that should have cut through the grief like a knife. Instead, Petunia's first reaction is not sorrow. It is revulsion. A baby on her pristine sofa, a lightning scar peeking from the blanket, and the word she spits is freak. "He will not stay here," she says, voice shaking. I told Lily when she chose your world, I want nothing to do with it. Or him." Vernon stands behind her, purple and silent, but the set of his jaw promises a war of his own. Dumbledore watches the way Petunia's hands hover, not to reach for Harry, but to push him away. He hears the echo of Lily's laughter in a house that will never welcome it, and he understands, with a cold, clinical clarity, placing Harry here would be a cruelty Lily never deserved. So what if the Blood Wards are not worth the cost? What if the safest arithmetic is not simply Lily's blood plus Petunia's house equals protection, but a deeper equation of intent, care, and consent? Wizarding guardianship law is messier than the fairy tale version. James and Lily's will, sealed in ministry wax, names Sirius first, then Remus. But Sirius is in Azkaban in the public record. Remus is flagged as unsafe by outdated lycanthropy statutes, and the ministry is in no hurry to challenge its own paperwork. That leaves blood priority, and Petunia's formal refusal, signed in a clipped hand that shakes only once. Here is where Dumbledore's other power comes in. Not the wand, the office. As Chief Warlock, he can endorse a magically binding guardianship contract in cases where a child is both politically sensitive and at risk. It's the same obscure clause once used to hide war orphans during Grindelwald's rise. It allows him to override a Muggle relative's rejection, if, and only if, he can find a magical guardian willing to be bound. He has one name, one promise, a man who fell to his knees in Dumbledore's office the night he realized Lily was dead and whispered, "Anything." Snape does not volunteer. He is summoned. Spinner's End smells of damp and regret when Dumbledore appears with a bundled child and a rolled parchment that hums with old magic. The conversation is not gentle. Dumbledore lays out the logic with surgical precision. Petunia has refused. The ministry will not risk an institution. The boy who lived cannot grow up in a public ward. Snape has already sworn to protect Lily's son. A monitored guardianship, reports to Dumbledore, order-adjacent wards, the right to remove Harry if Snape fails, threads the needle between safety and state custody. Is this punishment, Snape asks, voice raw, or penance? Choice, Dumbledore answers, and protection. for him, and perhaps in time, for you. The parchment unrolls on Snape's rickety table, lines of ink forming clauses about education, discipline, contact with the wider war. At the bottom waits a space for his name. When he presses quill to page, the magic takes hold. Ink lashes up his wrist in thin black strands, etching invisible chains that only he and Dumbledore can feel. A guardianship Giaz, break the terms, and his magic will answer for it. Snape does not flinch, but his hand curls reflexively, as if already feeling the weight of a life he never meant to hold. The contract seals with a soft crack that sounds in that cramped room, louder than any curse. Harry stirs in his arms for the first time, and somewhere far away, in a crumbling Albanian forest, something of Voldemort listens to the shift in protection around the boy who lived, and begins to turn. Because the blood wards are gone, the game board has changed, and the next move will demand a very different kind of home. Spinner's End, nursery of a weapon. Spinner's End is not a home. It is a scar the city forgot to clean. Soot-stained brick row houses lean over a narrow, oily river that never quite reflects the sky. The air tastes of coal dust and old rain. Windows glow weakly behind yellowing curtains. Every light a small act of war against the damp. This is where the boy who lived is brought after the night everything changed. Not to a bright suburban kitchen, but to a dead-end street that smells of rust and regret. Inside Snape's house, space is a suggestion, not a fact. Books tower in unstable columns, their spines cracked, titles worn to ghosts, potion ingredients crowd every surface, jars of pickled roots, coiled things in murky fluid, bundles of dried plants hanging from the ceiling like desiccated bats. The air is thick with lingering fumes, sharp and medicinal, the kind of smell that clings to hair and memory. And in the middle of this, against a wall that once held only shadows, stands a new intrusion. A crib. Plain ministry-issued wood. Clean white sheets that look almost obscene in this place. It is painfully out of place, a single fragile line of light scratched across a page written in black ink. What if that crib is the most dangerous object Severus Snape has ever agreed to house? He stands over it, face carved in stone. Grief has not softened him, it has calcified him. Lily is dead. James is dead. The prophecy he carried to Voldemort has cut through the grief like a knife and left only a single command: protect the child. He cannot look at Harry's eyes for long. They are Lily's eyes in James Potter's face, and that combination feels like a curse designed specifically for him. So he does not think of Harry as a child, not yet. He thinks of him as an artifact, a vessel of a protection Dumbledore cannot fully explain, a piece on a board where Voldemort and the Ministry both move unseen, an object to be guarded, contained, controlled. He prepares formula the way he brews a potion, measuring to the exact milliliter, checking the temperature with the same practiced flick he uses over a simmering cauldron. He casts warming charms on threadbare blankets, layering them with the precision of wards. When Harry cries at the sudden crack of his voice, snapping, "Enough!" Snape actually startles at himself, jaw tightening. The silence that follows is not peace, it is a stalemate. Nights are the worst. The house grows colder, the river outside whispering against its banks. Harry's screams rise, thin and furious, refusing to be soothed by rocking charms or carefully timed feeding schedules. Logic fails. Technique fails. War-hardened discipline fails. Exhausted, eyes burning, Snape does something he has not done since before he chose a different mark. He hums, a half-remembered Muggle tune Lily once played on a battered record player in Cokeworth. The melody is uneven, cracked at the edges, but Harry's crying stutters, then softens. Tiny fingers clutch at Snape's robe, face pressed against his shoulder, breath hitching into sleep. The contact hits harder than any curse. When did Harry get this warm? When did the weight on his shoulder stop feeling like a burden and start feeling like a question? This is that story. Not of a cupboard under the stairs, but of a narrow room above a poisoned river where a crib and a cauldron share the same stale air. Will Spinner's End become a prison that forges Harry into a weapon, honed by occlumency and bitterness? Or, despite Snape's intentions, will this cramped, haunted house become the crucible where a broken version of family is hammered into existence? The walls are listening, and the next choice Snape makes will decide which future takes root here. Dumbledore's gamble, monitoring the dungeon farther. The next choice arrives with a knock, not a dramatic thunderclap, not a phoenix's cry, just the soft, unmistakable rap of a knuckle on rotting wood at Spinner's End. The night everything changed already echoing in both their bones. Snape opens the door to find Albus Dumbledore on the step, rain clinging to his silver beard, a paper bag in one hand. The old man walks in without waiting for an invitation, because of course he does. He sets the bag on the chipped table, pulls out a saucer, and spills lemon drops onto the cracked porcelain, like they're an offering to some small, sticky god. Between them, Harry sleeps in a transfigured drawer, wandlessly warmed and warded, a shock of black hair against a threadbare blanket, the boy who lived, breathing shallowly in the stale air of the sitting room, where Severus once hid from his own father's fists. Conditions, Snape says, before Dumbledore can begin one of his gentle speeches. The word cuts through the grief like a knife. If you expect me to keep him here, we will be clear. Dumbledore's blue eyes flick to the drawer, then back. Of course, but first, safeguards. He lays them out like chess pieces. Regular welfare visits under the guise of order business. A ward network woven into the bones of Spinner's End, keyed to Severus and Harry alone, designed to flare at any attempt by Voldemort or the Ministry to breach the house. A silent alarm that will drag Dumbledore across Britain if Harry's life is threatened. And, unspoken until Snape forces it into words, a contingency. If I am judged unfit, Severus says, jaw tight. What then? Then Minerva will come, Dumbledore answers quietly. She has already agreed, for Harry's sake. The insult is deliberate. So is the lifeline. Dumbledore is gambling that the man who begged for Lily's life will do anything rather than hand her son to someone else. What if this is cruelty disguised as mercy? He is using Severus's guilt, twisting it into duty, just as he once weaponized a prophecy and sent James and Lily to war. Yet he also knows the truth. There is no blood ward now, no Privet Drive. If Harry is to live, another kind of magic must hold. Choice, commitment, the slow, grinding work of care. Snape sets his own lines in the dust. You will not parade him, he says. No headlines, no speeches. He is not a symbol for your war. And when he is older, Dumbledore asks, when the truth must be told. Not yet, Severus snaps. No prophecy, no Horcruxes, You will keep those secrets away from his childhood, or you may find yourself short one spy. Autonomy for education, privacy from politics. A childhood, however bleak the wallpaper. Dumbledore studies him for a long moment. This is that story, he thinks. The one where the man who helped make the weapon is forced to raise the boy instead. Can that heal anything? Or will it only harden the damage already done? He leaves the lemon drops on the saucer, a peace offering, a surveillance token, both. The door closes behind him with a hollow thud. In the dim, ward-humming quiet, Severus stands alone beside the makeshift crib, another heavier cloak settling over his shoulders. Spy, guardian, jailor, father. 4 roles, 1 narrow life. Harry stirs, a tiny fist uncurling toward the ceiling. What if? Severus whispers to the dark. This choice ruins us both. The house does not answer, but the wards flare softly, acknowledging their new charge as the war outside shifts in ways no one yet understands. Baby in the shadows, Harry's first magical surges. Magic comes before language, before memory, before the boy who lived knows what boy even means. In the dim rooms of Spinner's End, it begins with glass. Harry is barely steady on his feet, clutching the bars of a transfigured crib in the corner of Severus's sitting room. Shelves of potion ingredients line the far wall, vials stacked with the obsessive precision of a man who has survived war by never misplacing a single drop. One morning, as Severus scratches notes for Dumbledore in a tight, controlled hand, the air changes. A soft clink, then another. He looks up. 3 potion vials are drifting away from their shelf, wobbling in the air just beyond the reach of chubby fingers stretching through the bars. Harry is not crying, he is concentrating. Brows furrowed, mouth open, that peculiar toddler silence that means mischief. The vials bob when he giggles. Severus is across the room in an instant, wand out, heart hammering louder than the glass. He does not shout. He does not snatch. He slows them with a murmured charm, guides them back, eyes flicking between the vials and the child who has moved them without a word. Raw power. No visible strain. No wild shattering. What if, Severus thinks, throat dry. This is only the beginning. A vessel. A martyr. A weapon. Dumbledore and Voldemort would both see potential. The Ministry would see a resource. He sees Lily's eyes staring up at him from James's face, and the thought cuts through the grief like a knife. He could forbid it. He could frighten the magic back into hiding. Instead, he makes a choice. He lowers himself to Harry's level, joints protesting, takes the tiny hands in his, guiding them through the air where the vials floated. You felt it here, he says quietly, touching Harry's chest, then his forehead. Magic is not a toy. It is discipline. We direct it, or it directs us. Do you understand? Harry babbles something that is not an answer, but he watches Severus's mouth, the shape of the words, the measured calm, and that becomes the baseline. Not punishment, not shrill terror, but correction. Always correction. Weeks later, a stack of books on the floor rearranges itself into wobbling towers as Harry crawls past, the spines scraping, the air buzzing with unfocused will. When a curtain singes black from a sudden burst of heat during a toddler tantrum, Severus does not rage at the scorch mark. He grabs Harry's wrists, firm but not cruel, and waits until the boy's breathing slows. Fire answers anger, he says. You must choose when to call it, not the other way around. Choice, discipline. Names for sensations most children are told to hide. In another story, Privet Drive would have taught Harry to fear himself. Here, Spinner's End teaches him that magic is as normal as breathing, so long as he keeps it leashed. One evening, the experiment becomes deliberate. A single feather floats between them at the scarred kitchen table. Harry's legs dangle from his chair, heels kicking the wood. His tongue peeks out in sheer concentration. No wand, just Severus's voice, low and patient, threading through the stale air. Lift, Severus prompts. Feel where it lives. Chest, mind, hand. Then narrow it. The feather trembles, rises, wobbles in a crooked orbit. Harry's face splits in a proud, startled grin. A breathy, triumphant Severus escapes him. Severus allows the smallest of nods, barely there. But to Harry, it is everything. Approval becomes a horizon he will chase for years. The feather dips. For a heartbeat, it flares. Just a hint of heat, a suggestion of that earlier fire. Before settling, Severus's eyes narrow. If this is what Harry does at 3, what will he do at 11, under Dumbledore's gaze, under Voldemort's shadow? And when the time comes, whose discipline will hold? The curriculum of a spy, potions, occlumency, and silence. Discipline becomes the answer to Severus's silent question. He does not wait for Hogwarts. He does not wait for Dumbledore. If the boy who lived is going to stand under the Ministry's gaze and Voldemort's shadow, he will not walk there ignorant. So he writes a syllabus, not on parchment charmed with dancing ink, but in cramped, precise lines at the kitchen table in Spinner's End, the night everything changed from emergency guardianship to something that looked disturbingly like parenting. Basic reading and arithmetic, because even in war, a child must count and read. But between sums, Harry learns to sort dried roots by smell alone, to distinguish asphodel from dittany in poor light, to trace Latin roots of spells until incantations stop being nonsense sounds and start being architecture. Bedtime stories are the first casualty. There are no picture books in this house, no tales of brave little wizards on brooms. There are instead carefully chosen histories. A boy who trusted the wrong mentor and wound up dead. A brilliant witch whose experiment with fiend fire burned half a forest, and 3 friends. Sanitized, yes. Names blurred. But the lesson is sharp enough to cut through the grief like a knife. Magic is not safe. Choice is never simple. Power always has a cost. At 5, Harry can recite the properties of wolfsbane more easily than nursery rhymes. At 6, he can tell you why a miscast levitation charm on bone can shatter it. At 7, he asks why anyone would ever teach first years a spell without explaining the worst-case scenario. Severus approves, perhaps too much. Alongside potions and theory comes something quieter, stranger, occlumency, diluted for a child's mind. Severus never uses the word. Instead, he teaches Harry to build shelves. Thoughts go here, feelings go there. A bad memory is wrapped in imaginary cloth and pushed to the back. A good one is set on a higher shelf, out of reach of temper. Again, he says, voice low, when Harry's eyes flicker with anger at a careless remark. Name the feeling. Put it where it belongs. You decide what shows on your face. It is framed as discipline, as privacy. not as defense against a dead Dark Lord whose name still hangs over every story. What if someone tries to read your mind, is never asked aloud? But the shape of that question lives in every exercise. The result is a child who unnerves adults without understanding why. Harry grows up articulate, precise, and frighteningly self-contained. He listens more than he speaks. He notices everything, the way Severus's shoulders tighten when the prophet mentions Sirius, the way Dumbledore's eyes go distant on the word prophecy. He is praised for composure, for neat handwriting, for stirring exactly 7 times counterclockwise. No one praises him for being silly. No one teaches him how. He learns early that tears make Severus go very still and very quiet, and then assign more work. Severus refuses to lie about the darkness outside their wards. He does not tell Harry everything. Horcruxes are a word for later, but he never pretends the war is over. Death Eaters become cautionary figures in his lessons. A man who followed a charismatic leader instead of his conscience. A witch who thought fear was the same as respect. Trust is dissected the way they dissect potion failures. Who knew what? And when? What choice did they refuse to see? "This is not to frighten you," Severus says once, when Harry's jaw clenches at yet another story of betrayal. "Then why tell me?" "So you are not surprised," Severus answers. "Surprise kills." On paper, he is raising a protected child, wards, schedules, controlled exposure to everything dangerous. But in practice, every lesson, every mental shelf, every midnight conversation about power and its price chisels Harry into something else. Not a carefree ward of the headmaster, but a weapon honed in private. What if this is not just guardianship at all? What if, beneath the careful curriculum, Severus is constructing the perfect survivor for a second war he knows has only paused, never ended? And when that war finally breaks the surface again, whose design will Harry truly be following? His own, or the spy who raised him? Lily's ghost at the kitchen table. The first haunting comes on an ordinary Tuesday. Steam fogs the kitchen window at Spinner's End. Harry is on a rickety chair, chin barely above the table, tongue caught between his teeth as he copies potion ingredients in painstaking crooked letters. In the glass, his reflection blurs. Black hair, thin face, a flash of green eyes, and for a heartbeat, Severus doesn't see the boy who lived at all. He sees Lily, not the dead woman on the floor in Godric's Hollow. The girl at the riverbank, sunlight in her hair, arguing with him about whether he's being unfair to Sirius and James. The memory hits so hard it might as well be legilimency. It cut through the grief like a knife the night everything changed. It still does now. "Concentrate," he snaps too sharply. Harry startles, quill blotting ink. "Sorry." Precise. It lands in the same place Lily's would have. Severus feels his anger drain viciously fast. "Your spacing has improved," he hears himself say, voice turning cool, almost gentle. That is acceptable. Harry brightens at once. He doesn't know why copying a list earns reluctant praise when climbing the broken wall outside earned an hour of cold, clipped silence. He only knows that careful letters and quiet questions are safe, that wild laughter and risk are not. Because when Harry laughs like James, head back, unguarded, Severus shuts down. It happens the first time over burnt toast. Harry tells a story about a neighbor's cat stealing sausages, and the laugh bursts out of him, bright and reckless. For 1 second, the kitchen is a different war, a different era. Gryffindor boys roaring in the common room. Then Severus's face empties. His shoulders lock. The temperature in the room drops. "Eat," he says, in that flat dungeon voice. No explanation, no visible anger, just absence. Harry learns. Questions about spells, usually safe. Questions about Quidditch, pranks, house rivalries, dangerous ground. Curiosity about runes or potions earns a rare tight nod. Impulsive dares. Anything that tastes like James, bring down a sudden, surgical cruelty. Extra drills, cutting remarks about arrogance, detentions written in the privacy of their kitchen. Severus never names the pattern. He only lives it. He overcorrects every flash of James he sees, a swagger in Harry's walk, a flippant answer, a stubborn refusal to back down in an argument. Those traits are dragged out, dissected, punished until Harry flinches away from them. Yet when Harry stays up late to perfect a stirring technique, when he refuses to lie even though it would be easier, when he questions whether a hex is fair to cast at all, then the air shifts. Severus's eyes soften, just for a moment. "Your mother," he almost says. He never does. The pattern interrupt comes one rainy afternoon, tucked in a drawer he thought he had warded. Harry finds the photograph by accident, chasing a runaway quill. A young woman with red hair laughs on a bench by the lake, shoving a skinny boy with sallow skin and too big nose. She looks familiar in a way that makes his chest ache. "Who is she?" Harry asks at the kitchen table, placing the photo down between them like evidence. Severus goes rigid. Not the usual stillness. This is a full-body freeze, as if someone has cast Petrificus Totalis on his memories. His voice, when it comes, is flat, clinically precise. "Your mother." Harry's eyes widen. "She was your friend?" Burning. That's the only word for it. Not in his voice, which stays soft and deadly calm, but in his eyes. Old war, old guilt, old love, all roaring behind Occlumency walls. Once. Did you? Harry swallows. Did you love her? Silence. Then, carefully, love is not a topic for idle curiosity. His hand closes around the photograph with almost panicked care, knuckles white. "You will not touch my things without permission again." The reprimand is mild compared to other punishments, but the message lands harder than any shouted anger. Love lives on the same shelf as pain in this house, locked, guarded, dangerous to disturb. Harry files it away with all the other invisible rules. Don't laugh too loudly. Don't ask about James. Don't ask why Severus sometimes looks at him like he's a miracle, and other times like he's a crime scene. And beneath all of it, a question coils, unspoken. What if Severus never stops seeing Lily's shadow when he looks at Harry? What if the boy who lived is less a son, and more a living altar, built out of guilt, grief and second chances that came too late? This is that story, the story of whether a man who helped set the prophecy in motion can ever choose to see the child in front of him, instead of the dead woman he failed and the war he's still trying to rewrite through her son. A childhood without Privet Drive. There is no cupboard under the stairs in Spinner's End. There is a narrow box room with a real bed, a warded window, and shelves that fill faster than Harry's arms can carry the books. Instead of Dudley pounding on the door and stealing his breakfast, there is a timetable pinned above the desk. 8 o'clock, reading. 9 o'clock, writing. 10 o'clock, basic arithmancy puzzles that make primary school sums look insultingly easy. Hunger in this house is not for food. It is for unstructured minutes that never quite arrive. Snape does not starve the boy who lived. He feeds him precisely. Porridge measured, toast unburnt, a small vial of nutrient potion when growth charts dip even a fraction below where they should be. Clothes are plain but new. The bed is firm, the blankets warm, the room heated with a steady, practical charm. On paper, no ministry inspector could object, but affection is rarer than phoenix tears. A hand on Harry's shoulder appears only when Snape is adjusting his posture over a quill. Praise is an even stricter ration. Acceptable, he says the first time Harry copies a potion recipe without a blot. Harry treasures the word the way Canon Harry once hoarded a single birthday cake. What if your guardian never raised his voice in cruelty, yet almost never softened it in kindness? The Muggle world exists at the edge of Harry's life like a cautionary tale. Spinner's End is a Muggle street, but Snape walks it with his shoulders tight, his wand hidden, and his eyes always counting exits. You are not to draw attention, he tells Harry, again and again. They are not evil. They are careless. Carelessness gets wizards dead. It is not Petunia's hatred. It is a professional's assessment of a threat vector. So when, at 7, Harry's temper spikes in a shabby corner shop and the glass of the sweets counter vanishes with a pop, Snape is there, not Aunt Petunia dragging him home by the arm. A black shape moving faster than the shopkeeper can blink, wand flicking, memory clouded, glass repaired. Outside, in the alley that smells of chip fat and rain, the lecture cuts through the grief like a knife. Do you wish to be a curiosity in some ministry file, or on Voldemort's radar before you can even hold a proper wand? Harry stares at his shoes, cheeks burning. No, sir. Another year, another incident. Children on the estate dare each other to climb the broken factory. Harry, chased, ends up on the roof in a blink of terror and wind. Not a bewildered primary school teacher below, but Snape, jaw clenched, apparating to his side before the others can look up. You will learn control, he says, voice low. All control will be taken from you. That is the choice. So this Harry grows up knowing he is a wizard, knowing his mother was brilliant, his father a topic that closes Snape's face like a slammed door, and himself something between legacy and weapon. He learns occlumency exercises before multiplication tables. He can identify a bezoar before he has a best friend. He also knows one more thing. Snape is preparing him. For what? No one will say. Not Dumbledore, whose rare visits weigh the house down with secrets. Not the man who tucks advanced curse theory beside fairy tales. When the night everything changed finally comes for this version of Harry, he will not be surprised it arrived. Only at what side he was meant to stand on. The Ministry learns his name in connection with Severus Snape on a wet Tuesday that smells of coal smoke and boiled cabbage. There is no fanfare, no flash of cameras, no parade for the boy who lived. Just a sharp knock at the peeling door of Spinner's End, and a ripple through the quiet war being fought in offices and corridors Harry has never seen. Snape knows before he opens it. The wards whisper. Magic recognizes authority. He wipes ink from his fingers, smooths his expression into that dead, calm mask, and draws the door back. Madam Bones, he says with a polite dip of the head that is not quite a bow. Amelia Bones fills the doorway with broad shoulders and a monocle that glints like a small contained curse. Behind her, A thinner witch from the Children's Welfare Office clutches a clipboard, eyes darting past Severus's shoulder as if Harry might leap out, brandishing dark artifacts and trauma. "Routine welfare check," Bones says. Her voice is dry. "Given the unusual circumstances, may we come in?" What if, at the very beginning, the Ministry had simply said, "No, not him, not here"? This is that story. The house seems to answer, floorboards creaking as they step inside. Spinner's End is dingy but ordered. Books on every flat surface, potion ingredients in labeled jars, warded cupboards humming with quiet containment spells. The air tastes of aconite and strong tea. Severus has prepared for this as if for an inspection by Voldemort himself. He pours tea without spilling a drop. He produces parchment, lesson plans for Harry's reading, writing basic arithmancy, age-appropriate magical theory. He gestures, economical and precise, to the glowing lattice of potion safety wards around the workbench, to the reinforced locks on the basement door. "My ward," he says, the word catching for only half a heartbeat, "is not permitted near volatile ingredients unsupervised, nor near my correspondence, nor the flu." His tone is impeccably polite. His presence is slightly terrifying. Every answer is crisp, measured, edged. He gives them nothing of the man who wakes from dreams with Lily's name in his throat, nothing of the fury that could cut through the grief like a knife. Only competence. Only control. Bones walks the narrow hallway, peering into Harry's small bedroom. Clean sheets, a stack of fairy tales beside a copy of Hogwarts, a history and a primer on defensive wards. A toy broom shrunk and hung out of reach. Not abuse, not neglect, but not the shining sanctuary the legend of the boy who lived might suggest. "Dumbledore is aware of all arrangements?" she asks. "He orchestrated them," Severus replies. "He does not add, and he will answer for them if they fail." Relief flickers across the welfare witch's face. Albus Dumbledore is a comfortingly large name to write on a line labeled oversight. Yet unease lingers. A former Death Eater, a child weaponized by prophecy. A house in a Muggle mill town where the curtains are always drawn. Later, in the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, Amelia's voice is low. "He's safe enough," she tells a junior Auror, quill hovering over the file. "For now." But flag it. If Snape slips, if there's even a whisper, this comes straight to my desk. A quiet note, a coded remark in a meeting. Somewhere in the bowels of the Ministry, Harry Potter's name acquires a tag, Monitor. On the stairs of Spinner's End, Harry presses his ear to the banister as the adults' voices drift up. "The boy is an asset," the welfare witch murmurs. "A symbol," Bones answers. "In war, symbols are volatile. Asset, symbol. The words lodge under Harry's skin like splinters. He knows war and dead and Voldemort as vocabulary terms, not yet as memories, but this is the first moment he understands there is a story about him being told in rooms he will never see. And whatever Snape is preparing him for, it is not just survival, it is use. Letters from Hogwarts, McGonagall's watchful eye. The letters begin as Ministry paperwork. Professor Minerva McGonagall receives the first one on stiff, yellowing parchment. Dumbledore's neat note clipped to the corner. Severus has assumed guardianship. Your insight regarding his educational plans for the boy who lived would be appreciated. It is not flowery, it is not sentimental, It is a report. Potter demonstrates accelerated acquisition of basic magical theory, Snape writes. The ink so precise it might have been carved. He has been introduced to foundational potions safety, runic symbols, and controlled meditation. Emotional volatility remains significant. A 4-year-old does not have foundational runic symbols without hours of drilling. Emotional volatility, in Snape's mouth, could mean anything from tantrums to tears. What if this too is a war, she thinks? Only the battlefield is a sitting room, and the weapons are expectations. Her reply is formally worded, almost old-fashioned in its restraint. She praises Harry's progress. Then the shift, a single paragraph that cuts through the grief like a knife. At his age, she notes, peer interaction is as crucial as academic advancement. Might I suggest age-appropriate magical games, simple transfiguration puzzles, charms-based play, even supervised visits with children from wizarding families? Snape's response is swift. The neighborhood is unsuitable. I will not expose him to idle curiosity or ill-informed speculation. The boy's status as symbol is already burdensome. Controlled solitude is preferable to dangerous attention. She offers to visit. He delays. Schedules. Reschedules. Months pass, marked by his clipped updates, Harry's reading level, his potion brewing precision, his progress in occlumency exercises no child should yet need. Then, unexpectedly, a break in the pattern. If you insist on observing his development firsthand, one letter concedes you may call on Spinner's End this Saturday. 1 hour. Do not discuss the Dark Lord, the Ministry, or his parents' deaths. The house is narrow, dim, and too quiet. McGonagall steps into a sitting room lined with books, cauldron scrubbed to a dull shine, and a small table where a boy sits with his back very straight. "Mr. Potter," she says. He looks up, green eyes behind round spectacles, a quill paused above a primer on basic spell structure. The scar is there, of course, but so is something else. The flinch that doesn't reach his face, only his shoulders, held rigid as if braced for correction. "Good afternoon, Professor," he answers, careful, formal, echoing Snape's cadence. She examines his parchment. His magical literacy is astonishing. He can identify wand movements by diagram. He knows the difference between transfiguration and conjuration in theory. But when she gently adjusts the way he holds his quill, his hand jerks, then freezes. "Relax, Mr. Potter," she murmurs. "You are not in trouble, merely learning." His gaze flicks to Snape, standing in the doorway like a sentry. Something in his shoulders eases when she does not raise her voice, when her correction is soft, when the word Mr. Potter carries not distance but a hint of fondness. What if, he wonders, without having the language for it yet, not all adults sound like slammed doors? She conjures a simple transfiguration game, turning buttons into beetles and back again, and invites him to try. He fails twice, bites back an apology, then succeeds on the third attempt. Her praise is quiet but immediate. "Well done." Snape's eyes flicker. Pride, irritation, fear of attachment. She cannot tell. But she sees enough. When she leaves, the street outside is damp and grey. Her owl reaches Dumbledore before nightfall. "He is well cared for," the note reads, "but I worry about the cost." This is that story. Not just of the boy who lived, but of the adults already arguing, silently and on parchment, over what he should become. And those arguments are only going to get louder. The truth in pieces, Harry learns he's the boy who lived. The arguments do get louder, but not in the Wizengamot, or the Ministry, or even in Dumbledore's office. They get louder in a narrow sitting room in Spinner's End, on a wet July afternoon, when a small boy with ink on his fingers finally asks the question Severus has been dreading. Why did he want me dead? Harry is 9, almost 10. His voice is steady, his green eyes are not. Anchor first, Severus has told himself that all morning. Anchor, then cut. He has paced grooves into the thin carpet, cloak whispering around his ankles, rehearsing the story the way other men rehearse for war. Lily first, then the Dark Lord, then as little of James as possible. What if he simply refused? What if he said, "It is over, Potter," and walked away? The thought is tempting. Cowardly, he discards it with the same ruthless precision he uses on ruined potion drafts. He sits opposite Harry, the low table between them cluttered with old Daily Prophets and a chipped teacup. Outside, the factory river stinks of oil and smoke. Inside, the air tastes of dust, stale tea, and unsaid things. "You remember," Severus begins, "that there was a war." Harry nods. He has heard the word before. War. In snatches, in half answers. His scar throbs when the rain is heavy. He has noticed that even if Severus has never confirmed it, there was a man, Severus continues, a wizard who called himself Lord Voldemort. He watches Harry flinch. Good. Better to learn the name now than jump at it later. He believed power was the only thing that mattered. Power and purity and fear. He does not say, "I carried pieces of his orders on my tongue." He does not say, "I am the reason the night everything changed existed at all." He killed many people. Your mother stood against him. His voice roughens on that word, despite himself. Lily was brave, brilliant, stubborn. She joined the fight when she could have hidden. She made her choice. "And my dad?" Harry asks. The word dad always lands awkwardly on Severus's ears, as if it has no right to be in this house. Severus's jaw tightens. James Potter was reckless, he says at last. Talented, but arrogant. He fought as well. He died there too. Not a hero, not a monster, just a man who got Lily killed too soon in Severus's private accounting. Harry swallows. And me? Why am I the boy who lived? The phrase feels foreign in his mouth, something overheard in Diagon Alley and never explained. Severus chooses each word as if it might explode. Voldemort went to Godric's Hollow to kill you. There was a prophecy. He believed you would be his downfall. He murdered your parents, then turned his wand on you. The curse rebounded. He vanished. You survived. How? Harry's fingers curl against his knees. Because of a prophecy? Because I'm supposed to do something? No. Too sharp. Severus forces the word flatter. Not because you were destined, because your mother placed herself between you and the curse. Because magic is not a story written in advance. It is a web of choices and consequences. Hers held. His failed. You lived. He emphasizes the chaos, the unfairness, the sheer accident of it. He refuses to paint a legend. He will not raise a martyr in his own house. Harry listens. Horror and fascination braided together. A dark wizard obsessed with power. Parents dead on a floor he cannot remember. His survival an accident, not a coronation. So he could come back, Harry says quietly. Not a question. A conclusion. Severus's eyes flicker. Magic that great does not vanish, he admits. If he returns, there will be another war. But you are not a weapon, Potter. You are a child. Remember that. That night, Harry stands before the cracked mirror in the tiny upstairs bedroom. The house is silent, except for the drip of a leaking gutter and the faint, restless creak of Severus pacing below. Harry touches his scar. It prickles under his fingertips. Voldemort, he whispers, testing the name, tasting the fear and refusing to spit it out. The boy who lived. The boy who was meant to die. If he comes back, he murmurs to his reflection, I'll be ready. Ready for what? He has no idea. Books, spells, secrets Severus still hasn't told him. Downstairs, a hidden drawer of dark arts texts hums behind wards. Upstairs, a child who has just learned he was meant to die plans for a future he cannot yet imagine. And between them, in the narrowing space where truth and omission meet, something dangerous begins to grow. From cupboard to cauldron, a different 11-year-old, the boy in the narrow bed does not sleep. By 11, Harry knows the names of half the ingredients in Severus's private stores. He can define a bezoar, recite the properties of aconite, and explain why wolfsbane changed a war that left his parents dead. He can hold a wand without flinching. Under supervision, he can cast a steady lumos, a precise Wingardium Leviosa, even a shaky but serviceable cushioning charm. He knows far less about how to ask another child to play. What if the boy who lived grew up fluent in magical terminology, but illiterate in playground rules? Instead of cupboard dust and Dudley's fists, his childhood has been ruled by schedules, syllabi, and a man who turns emotion into an enemy to be mastered. Severus has taught him early that magic buckles under panic, so Harry learns to breathe, to count to 10, to smooth his face until the storm inside goes quiet. The result is unnerving. For an 11-year-old, he is composed, precise, almost clinical. Years of potions training have honed a sharp analytical mind. He sees cause and effect everywhere. A potion curdles, he lists variables. A ward flickers, he replays each rune in his head. Defensive theory has been fed to him not as heroics, but as equations, angle, distance, spell chain, escape route. And behind all of it, like a quiet shield, there is occlumency, not the brutal mind-breaking Severus will one day use on teenage Harry in another timeline, but a scaffolding. Simple exercises. Remember a room in perfect detail. Hold a memory steady without letting it blur. Notice when your thoughts try to run away. It makes Harry unusually self-aware. He can feel when fear spikes, when anger rises, when guilt tries to cut through the grief like a knife. But self-awareness is not the same as freedom. His weaknesses are etched into the spaces Severus cannot fill. Social skills, for one. Children are theory, not practice. Harry has watched them in Diagon Alley in Madame Malkin's, at the apothecary, but he has almost never spoken to them. When threatened, he overthinks instead of acting on instinct, mentally cataloguing spells and counterspells while his body stalls. And under everything is that deep, choking terror of disappointing Severus. The man who saved him. The man who could, Harry believes in some quiet corner, decide he was a mistake. One evening, a week before his birthday, Harry finds Severus at the kitchen table marking essays for a class Harry has never seen. Professor. Harry hesitates in the doorway. The title is Half Habit, Half Armor. Severus does not look up immediately. Yes. What house were you in? The quill stills. A beat too long. Slytherin, he says at last. As you well know. Harry swallows. What house should I want? That lands between them with the weight of the ministry, of Dumbledore, of the night everything changed. Gryffindor means James. Slytherin means Severus. Hufflepuff. Ravenclaw escape routes on parchment that do not exist in Severus's heart. Severus sets the quill down with surgical care. You should want, he says slowly, the house that will keep you alive. A pause. Ambition is not a sin, Harry, nor is cunning. Remember that. His voice is neutral. His eyes are not. For a flicker, Harry sees it. Hope, sharp and terrified, that the boy who lived will choose the house that once chose Severus. The next morning, the owl arrives. The letter is expected. Dumbledore has written twice. The Hogwarts prospectus has been studied, annotated, nearly memorized. Yet when the parchment slides onto the table, heavy with green ink and old magic, the air shifts. Harry's hand trembles as he breaks the seal. This is that story. Not a child dragged from a cupboard into wonder, but a weapon in training stepping toward a castle that thinks it already knows his name, his scar, his destiny. He realizes, with a clarity that feels almost like occlumency, that whatever life Severus has built around him is about to collide with a world that has its own expectations, its own myths, its own claims on the boy who lived. For the first time, Harry wonders, when those stories clash, whose choice will matter? Platform 9 3/4, enter Hermione Granger. King's Cross is loud in a way, Spinner's End never is. Steel and steam and 100 conversations blur into a single. Pulsing noise as Severus Snape stands on the Muggle side of the barrier, black robes transfigured into an ill-fitting overcoat, looking like a shadow that has wandered into the sun. He hates it here. Too exposed. Too many eyes. Too many ways this can go wrong. He grips Harry's shoulder, fingers firm but not cruel. You remember what we discussed? Not a question. A command sharpened by the night, everything changed. Harry nods. Discretion. Don't volunteer information. Observe before engaging. His voice is calm, the cadence almost professor-like. And if Dumbledore approaches, I'm to be courteous, non-committal, a ghost of a sneer. You are not a chess piece for the headmaster. He will attempt to make you one, especially once the Ministry Circus starts whispering in his ear again about the boy who lived. His eyes glitter. You will not let him. What if I'm sorted somewhere he doesn't expect? Harry asks, quiet but pointed. Does that help? Snape's mouth twists. War and schoolhouses, tangled in one question. It gives us leverage. Remember, alliances matter. Gryffindor does not have a monopoly on bravery, nor Slytherin on ambition. You choose your friends with your mind, not your scar. The word choice hangs between them. Choice. Harry straightens under it. Then, with the practiced efficiency of someone who's walked through ward lines since he could toddle, Harry turns toward the barrier. No running start. No panicked dash. He simply steps through brick that isn't, breath even, Occlumency shields resting like a second skin. Platform 9 3/4 hits him like a spell. Heat from the Scarlet Engine, owls shrieking in wicker cages, cats yowling, Trunks clattering, parents laughing and crying at once. Magic crackles in the air, raw and unhidden. For a boy raised in near isolation, in quiet rooms that smelled of potions and old parchment, it is overwhelming. His heartbeat spikes. He catalogues details to ground himself. Locomotive, 19th century design, updated with runic arrays. Wards, layered, transport-focused, not defensive. Children, loud, unshielded, bleeding thoughts at him. "Excuse me," a brisk voice cuts in, precise and unexpectedly authoritative. "You're blocking the trolley." Harry blinks. A girl stands there, hair an untamed halo, front teeth a little too large, Hogwarts letter clutched in one ink-stained hand. Her eyes flick over him, robes, trunk, the way he's standing, as if he's a puzzle to be solved, not a legend. He steps aside automatically. "Apologies, I was observing." She sniffs. "Well, you can observe without obstructing." Honestly. Then, almost in the same breath, you know the locomotive isn't actually 19th century. The basic chassis is, but the magical retrofit in 1830 completely replaced the boiler system. I read it in Hogwarts: A History. Harry's mouth curves just a little. The boiler was replaced, he concedes, but the original iron frame still holds the primary runic lattice. You can see the stress discoloration near the front coupling. It means the first enchanters prioritized structural continuity over efficiency. Professor Snape, my guardian, explained the trade-off. Not a clueless muggle-born, not a starstruck fan. Another overprepared, anxious first year? That's actually correct, she admits. Grudging. Most people don't know about stress discoloration. Most people don't look, Harry answers. A touch dry. There's a spark there. Mutual assessment. Mild irritation layered over the faint, unwilling respect of two people who have spent too long being the cleverest in the room. "I'm Hermione Granger," she says finally, chin lifting. "And you are?" She stops, eyes flicking to his scar widening. A beat. Then she clamps her mouth shut, visibly choosing not to say it. "Harry," he offers. "Only Harry." "Fine," she mutters, turning the trolley with more force than necessary. Another boy who thinks he knows everything. She marches away toward the train, already mentally shelving him somewhere between challenge and nuisance. Harry watches her go, the noise of the platform fading to a dull roar around the sudden sharp interest in his chest. Someone who doesn't revere him, someone who doesn't fear him, someone who corrects him. For the first time since stepping onto the platform, he smiles. What if the first person to meet the boy who lived at Hogwarts isn't a fan or an enemy, but a rival in waiting? This is that story. The Sorting Hat meets a Slytherin-raised Potter. The Great Hall is a cauldron of whispers. The name ripples through the air before McGonagall even calls it. Potter, the boy who lived. The boy Snape took. Students crane their necks, staff chairs tighten, and the story they think they know collides with the boy walking up the aisle in Severus Snape's perfectly pressed robes. Harry feels every stare he's been trained to. Assessment is a kind of war, Snape told him once, and the enemy always looks for weakness in your eyes. So he keeps his gaze level, his breathing even. His mind sliding into the disciplined, quiet occlumency drills have carved into him since the night everything changed. He does not think about Lily. He does not think about the dead. He thinks about blank walls and still water as he approaches the stool. The hat drops over his eyes, and the world vanishes. Ah, the voice is dry, amused, and then abruptly sharp. Well, this is different. The hat is used to open books. Children whose thoughts spill everywhere. But Harry's mind is warded, edges smoothed, certain memories blurred with deliberate care. Occlumency at 11. Who taught you that, I wonder? It murmurs, though it already knows. Slytherin discipline coils through him, a familiar, cool precision that smells of potion fumes and old stone. But beneath that, flickers, reckless curiosity, the urge to push doors just because they are closed, the flash of a boy who would dive after a snitch, or a secret with the same wild focus. Gryffindor, the hat notes, and not faintly. You could do remarkable things in Slytherin, it whispers, tasting ambition not for glory, but for control. Cunning, strategy, a mind that maps people the way others map corridors. With your guardian's training, with your name, you could reshape that house. What if the snake learned to protect instead of poison? The image comes unbidden. The pale, pointed faces from the train, Malfoy's lazy contempt, the casual certainty that Harry belongs with them. The hat catches it, weighs it against a memory of Snape's hand on Harry's shoulder, heavy with something that might be expectation, might be fear. Snape will want Slytherin, it says quietly. Dumbledore is watching for Gryffindor. You stand between two wars that haven't quite started. Do you really wish to sit in the serpent's nest, under Lucius Malfoy's eye, with Voldemort's old banners still whispered about in the dark? Harry hesitates, not in panic, in calculation. If he goes to Slytherin, he will be a symbol, a weapon, a prize for every pure-blood agenda the Ministry pretends is dead. If he goes to Gryffindor, he becomes Dumbledore's lesson, the tame hero in scarlet and gold. Where in all of that is Harry Potter allowed to be anything but a story someone else is writing? I don't want the house they want, he thinks, carefully directing the thought upward. I want the house where I can become my own person, where I can watch them all, where I can choose. The hat goes very still. Not Slytherin. Not a plea, a strategy. Interesting, it breathes. Very well, Mr. Potter. If you wish room to move on the board, then there is only one place that will both shield you and test you. The brim twitches. Shall we see what happens to Hogwarts when the boy who lived walks into... And then it shouts. First classes, first masks. Harry at Hogwarts. Slytherin. The word slams through the hall. For a heartbeat, Hogwarts forgets to breathe. The boy who lived in green and silver. Not the canon war everyone expected. Something has already changed. Harry walks to the Slytherin table under a forest of stairs. Malfoy's smirk is sharp and assessing. The older snakes whisper behind pale hands. Harry feels every gaze, measures every angle, and remembers a voice in a dim kitchen at Spinner's End. Attention is a weapon, Potter. Let them underestimate you. Classes begin, and the mask goes on. In potions, he is walking familiar ground. The dungeon smells of asphodel and damp stone, of nights where grief and fury boiled over cauldrons until precision cut through the grief like a knife. Snape prowls between tables, robes snapping. He does not look at Harry once. He doesn't have to. Harry's knife work is exact, his stirring flawless, his timing unerring. He could brew this cure for boils with his eyes closed, and once, half asleep over summer, he nearly did. But when Snape snaps results on my desk, Harry is careful. 1 or 2 hairs off perfect, a smudge of ash on the rim. Enough to be good, not enough to be a prodigy. What if brilliance paints a target on your back? In history of magic and astronomy, theory is easy. Dates, treaties, star charts. Snape drilled him on the Ministry, on goblin rebellions, on the First War against Voldemort until Harry could recite casualty figures like nursery rhymes. McGonagall's essays come back with neat check marks and the barest hint of approval in her eyes. Flitwick's squeaky praise is soft but precise. Excellent grasp of principles, Mr. Potter. Your wand work will catch up. That is where the cracks show. In charms, the feather trembles, then drops. In transfiguration, his matchstick twitches toward a needle and stops halfway. Theory he has. Practice he does not. Spinner's End did not echo with childish swishes and flicks. It echoed with occlumency drills and the quiet, murderous logic of a spy. So Harry does something that would horrify most 11-year-olds. He leans into being average. He frowns at his wand, lets his shoulders tense, allows a small, frustrated huff. To classmates watching, he is struggling just enough to be normal. To McGonagall, he is disciplined, controlled, never the reckless James copy she braced for. To Flitwick, he is the boy who asks sharp questions about magical theory and then deliberately muffs the practical by a fraction. Quirrell is different. The stammering defense professor lets his gaze snag on Harry, probing, oily. But when their eyes meet, Harry's mind folds in on itself just as Snape taught him. A blank wall, a still pond, no foothold. Quirrell's smile flickers, then slides away. Manipulating a neglected child is easy. Manipulating a boy who has been training for war since the night everything changed is something else. The social battlefield is worse. Snape's warnings hang over every conversation. Trust is a luxury. Observe first, move later. Harry listens more than he speaks, files away names, alliances, tells. To some Slytherins, his reserve is arrogance. To others, it is intriguing, a mystery with a famous scar. Hermione Granger in Gryffindor red and gold notices him for a different reason. At first, he is a rival, another student who always has the answer, who quotes obscure magical lore in history, who seems to carry the Ministry archives in his head. She bristles when he corrects bins on a date. He inclines his head, cool and distant, and she files him under competition. Then she sees him hesitate when Neville drops his books. Sees the fraction of a second where Harry calculates risk, consequence, exposure, over helping someone pick up parchment. She sees him flinch, not at raised voices, but at sudden kindness. Her questions shift. Where did you learn that? Becomes, who taught you that? Their first real conversation is in the library, over a stack of defense texts Harry should not know exist. She challenges his interpretation. He counters with something Snape muttered once about dueling forms. It is not friendship yet. It is an alliance of minds, 2 sharp blades testing each other's edge. At night, in his 4-poster bed, curtains drawn tight, Harry lies awake. The Slytherin dormitory hums with whispered gossip and the soft crackle of the fire. It is warm, alive, crowded with breathing bodies and shifting blankets. Spinner's End was quiet, too quiet. Silence there was a verdict, not a comfort. He stares up into the dark and feels the split inside him. Snape's ward, Hogwarts student, weapon, child. Which one is real? He does not know. He only knows this: every choice he makes from here will decide whose story he is living. And somewhere in the castle, Severus Snape is asking himself the same question. Snape the professor. Morning in the dungeons comes with a different kind of chill. Not the damp cold of stone and subterranean water, but the precise surgical cold of Severus Snape putting his mask back on. Harry sits at a front table because he has to. Because Potter being near the board is safer than Harry being near Snape. The classroom smells of wormwood and metal, and the whisper of Slytherin robes is a low, constant hiss. Snape sweeps in, robes billowing, expression blank. The boy who lived watches the man who raised him become someone else. There will be no foolish wand-waving or silly incantations in this class. Snape says, voice soft and deadly. The infamous speech lands heavier for Harry because he's heard the draft versions muttered over washing up, heard the contempt for sloppy brewing honed on his own homework. I can teach you how to bottle fame, brew glory, even stop a death. He does not look at Harry on that line. Not once. When he begins questions, it's the canon script with a vicious edit. Potter, he snaps, and the name hits Harry like a slap. Not Harry, not child, Potter. What would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood? Harry knows the answer. Of course he does. Snape drilled it into him at the chipped kitchen table in Spinner's End, until his hand cramped. But the way Severus is looking at him now, no, not looking at him, looking through him, turns certainty to ash. His mouth goes dry, he stumbles. Snape pounces. Fame clearly does not guarantee intelligence. Snape drawls, and the Slytherins laugh. Draco smirks. Pansy snickers, and Harry feels something inside him flinch that has nothing to do with academic failure. What if this is who Snape really is? What if the man who made him tea when nightmares cut through the grief like a knife is the mask? And this is the truth. He watches Snape dock points, sneer at Neville, praise a mediocre Slytherin chop as if it were art. Every hint of their home life is erased with almost obsessive care. When Harry's hand strays toward the wrong jar, Snape's correction is not a quiet, familiar, "No, Harry," but a barked, "Potter, do try not to kill us all." In the common room that night, the story spreads. "Snape hates you," Ron says, half horrified, half impressed. "Must be something your dad did," Hermione, who has seen Harry's meticulous notes months before Hogwarts, frowns. "Are you sure he's not pushing you harder because he expects more?" Pity, resentment, wild theories about hidden favoritism that no one has ever seen. Every housemate invents their own version of the war between professor and student. The truth is harsher. Snape is overcorrecting. Public warmth would be a weapon in other people's hands. A Death Eater's ward, obviously favored by a former Death Eater. The Ministry would talk. Dumbledore would wonder. Voldemort's old allies would notice. So Severus chooses the cruelest camouflage he can imagine. He becomes exactly what the world expects. After class, the mask slips, but not all the way. Harry lingers, pretending to straighten his bag. His hand is red where a drop of boiling potion splashed his skin. "Stay," Snape says, low. He doesn't apologize. He doesn't say his name. He just takes Harry's wrist, casts a silent healing charm that cools the burn to a faint pink, and murmurs, counterclockwise on the final stir, "You know this." "Yes, sir." Snape releases him. Do not give them a reason to think you incompetent, a beat, or weak. Is that protection or pressure? Punishment or care? Which version of Snape is real, the guardian who heals or the professor who wounds? Harry walks back into the corridor, hand unmarked, mind burning. The performance in class is over. The war for his trust has barely begun. The stone, replayed with a prepared Harry. The performance in class is over, but the performance of the year is only just beginning. By October, the castle feels different. Wards hum under Harry's skin when he walks past the third-floor corridor, a faint pressure against his occlumency shields, the way Snape taught him to notice. There are more patrols, more locked doors, more professors disappearing into whispered meetings. This is not a prank. This is war practice wearing school robes. He starts where Snape always starts, with information. Harry lingers outside the staff room, pretending to tie his shoe, ears straining. McGonagall's clipped whisper. Hagrid's rumble. Quirrell's stammer. A phrase cuts through the noise like a knife. The stone. Not a stone. The stone, capital letter weight. Philosopher's Stone, Harry thinks, recalling a dusty entry in an old potions text Snape made him read at Spinner's End. Elixir of life. Gold. Immortality. What if Dumbledore has brought that into a school full of children? Canon Harry would have wandered toward danger on instinct. This Harry goes to the library. He and Hermione claim a back table and build a plan the way other first years build card houses. Research first. Alchemical treatises, Nicholas Flamel, the ethics of immortality that Remus once muttered about over tea. Observation second. Track which professors linger near the third-floor corridor, who looks strained at meals, who smells of singed robes. Interrogation third. Hagrid, because Hagrid never could keep a secret from a determined child. Juice's school business, Hagrid insists, hands too big and guilty around his tankard. Dumbledore's got it under control. Harry files away the plural in Hagrid's slip. They're all protecting it, and the mention of a three-headed dog, not a prank, a vault. Through it all, he watches Quirrell and Snape. Quirrell's eyes skitter away from contact, his turban too heavy, his aura wrong. Snape's gaze, by contrast, lands on Quirrell like a curse. In class, the hostility is vicious, almost theatrical. Harry recognizes the pattern. This is how a spy behaves when he wants the enemy to underestimate him, isn't it? And yet, there are moments when the cruelty feels too sharp, when the detentions cut deeper than cover should require. When Snape sneers fame isn't everything, Potter. In front of the whole class, Harry feels the boy who lived and the boy Snape is raising split for a heartbeat. Which version does Snape see? When they finally decide to move, after the troll, after Quidditch, after a whispered warning from overheard staff room panic, Harry doesn't sneak out on a whim. He drafts a mission. He walks Hermione and Ron through escape routes, timing Filch's rounds against the castle clocks. He rehearses spells in an empty classroom. Lumos, Alohomora, basic shields, the few jinxes Snape taught him, for self-defense, not glory. He spends an extra 10 minutes each night on Occlumency, building mental walls, rehearsing the feel of another presence pressing against his mind. If Quirrell is compromised, if Voldemort is not as dead as the Ministry insists, Harry intends to feel it before it breaks him. At the trap door, with the three-headed dog asleep to Hermione's enchanted music, the air is thick with dog breath and fear. Harry's heart hammers, but his mind is cold. If Snape is truly on Dumbledore's side, then everything, the harsh words, the endless drills, the bruising lessons on secrecy and shields, has been preparation for this. For stepping into the dark on purpose, Harry looks once sharply, back up the corridor as if he might see a black silhouette at the end of it. He doesn't. He swallows, tightens his grip on his wand, and drops through the trapdoor. He promises himself, in the heartbeat of freefall, that he will prove worthy of the training he's been given, or die trying. Below, something waits, and not even Snape has prepared him for what exactly he's about to face. Face to face with Quirrell, Occlumency versus Possession, the chamber is open and full of whispers. Torchlight gutters along the stone, throwing the mirror of Erist into sharp, shifting relief. It looms in the center of the room like an accusation or a promise. Harry lands hard, rolls, and comes up with his wand in his hand, breath ragged but gaze level. This is not the wide-eyed child of canon stumbling into a nightmare. This is the boy who lived, who has spent a year being told, in a voice like iron, that fear is information, not a verdict. Quirrell steps from behind the mirror. The stutter is gone. His smile is a predator's baring of teeth. No friends tonight, Potter? His eyes narrow almost immediately because something is wrong. The child in front of him should be shaking. Instead, Harry's wand is steady. His shoulders are tight, yes, but his gaze doesn't flinch. What if all those evenings in Snape's sitting room, with the curtains drawn and the air thick with potion fumes, were leading here? Again, Snape would say, sending sharp, needling probes at Harry's mind. Clear it. Compartmentalize. You do not get to fall apart in the middle of a war. Harry had hated it. He had gone to bed with headaches that cut through the grief like a knife. But now, facing the man who is not just a man, those drills click into place. Quirrell's eyes glaze for a moment. The air goes colder. Voldemort presses forward, unseen but palpable, a weight against Harry's skin. Let me see. The whisper slides through the chamber, far too intimate. A Occlumency probe lashes out, quick and vicious. It hits a wall, not a graceful Occlumen's fortress, a clumsy barricade of half-formed images. Snape's scowl, the feel of a stirring rod in his hand, the sound of Lily's name spoken only once. On the night, everything changed. But it is a wall. The probe skids, catches on rough edges, finds no easy purchase. Voldemort recoils, irritated. Who has been teaching you, boy? Quirrell's voice drops, the sibilance edged with real curiosity now. Another probe. Harder. It batters against Harry's makeshift compartments, splintering some, failing to breach others. They cannot slide into his mind with the subtlety they expected. They are forced back onto cruder tools. Threat, promise, the old repertoire. Think, the voice purrs. I can bring them back. Your mother, your father. Power enough to make the ministry kneel. All you must do is give me the stone. Harry's heart is hammering so hard his ribs ache. Terror claws at his throat. But Snape's voice is louder in his memory. One thought, one anchor. You choose it before the pain starts. You cling to it. So Harry chooses. Not Sirius, not Remus, not even Lily's laugh. The stone, the simple, stubborn idea that Voldemort must not have it. He wraps his mind around that single intention until it is the only clear thing in the room. Liar, he says, and his own voice surprises him with how flat it sounds. The duel that follows is messy, brutal, nothing elegant. Spells crack against stone. The mirror throws back fractured images of Harry and Quirrell locked in a dance of light and shadow. When Quirrell lunges, hands closing around Harry's throat, Harry feels it. Wrongness. A tearing, hollow drag, as if the man's body is a cupboard someone has drilled into from the outside. A parasite, clinging where a soul should be. Harry doesn't have the word Horcrux, but his Occlumency sharpened senses register the vacancy, the borrowed life. His skin burns. Quirrell screams as Harry's hands clamp down in return. Deliberate this time. Harry holds on, understanding at some bone-deep level that this is what Voldemort has done to cheat death. Carved himself up, stuffed the pieces into flesh and object alike, made himself both present and dead. The world goes white. When the light clears, Quirrell is crumpled and still. Harry lies nearby, unconscious, fingers clenched as if still gripping an invisible throat. Dumbledore arrives first, robes whispering over stone, eyes taking in the scene in a single piercing sweep. Snape is half a heartbeat behind him, breath harsh from running. His gaze finds Harry and the mask he has worn since Lily died. Simply breaks. Just for a second. His face is naked horror, raw and unguarded. Then he remembers the watching staff, the war, the story they must all keep telling. The Occlumen's shutters slam down. His voice, when he speaks, is cold and precise, already directing the infirmary preparations. But his hands, when they lift the boy who lived from the floor, are shaking, and Dumbledore sees it. What does a spy do when his greatest secret is no longer his own? This is that story. Aftermath in the hospital wing. Secrets and half-truths. Harry wakes to voices before he remembers pain. Not one voice. Two. The hospital wing is washed in late afternoon light, the air thick with potions and starch, and the faint metallic tang of magic burned too hot. Dumbledore's silhouette is a calm mountain at the foot of his bed. Snape is a hard black line at his side, arms folded, eyes already on Harry's face the second he stirs. "Ah," Dumbledore says softly. "The boy who lived lives yet again." Snape's jaw tightens. It is not a joke to him. It is a tally. Memory slams back. The mirror, the fire, Quirrell's hands, that impossible flaying pressure in his mind, and Harry's heart lurches into a sprint. "Professor," he rasps, and he does not mean Dumbledore. What happened? Where is he? Not through luck, through training. Snape's training. The night everything changed, the man who once begged for Lily's life chose a different vow. He would not raise a fool. Dumbledore moves first. Of course he does. You were very brave, Harry. Your mother's protection, her love, once again stood between you and Voldemort. He could not touch you without paying a terrible price. It is the familiar story, polished smooth. Love, sacrifice, protection. But Harry's mind, honed on Occlumency drills and Snape's relentless insistence on precision, snags on the gaps. That doesn't explain the feeling, he says slowly. In my head, when he looked at me, it was like someone trying a locked door. Pattern interrupt. The words hang there. Snape's eyes flick to Dumbledore, sharp as a curse. Legilimency, Snape says, before the headmaster can soften it. A magical art of invading the mind. Quirrell was no master, but his, Passenger, has great skill. His tone is clinical, but the look he gives Harry is not. It is warning and apology. Dumbledore clears his throat. Severus is quite right on the magical theory, he concedes, that small admission cutting through the grief like a knife. But what matters now is that you resisted. Your mother's protection and your own strength held. Not even the headmaster is infallible. Snape has told Harry that in private, in quieter words. Now he demonstrates it, in public, in front of the man who runs the war. Harry swallows. Voldemort's dead, he says. Everyone says so. But that wasn't just a ghost, was it? Dumbledore's gaze is ancient, tired. There are pieces of him still in this world, he admits, fragments of a soul that refused to pass on. What you faced was one such fragment, clinging to Quirrell's life, not the whole truth. Harry hears the missing weight in the sentence, the way Snape goes utterly still beside him. What if he comes back? Harry presses, properly. And what if he tries that mind thing again? I should know how to stop it. Snape steps in, voice low, controlled. Your task, for now, is to heal and to study. Occlumency, discipline, control, those we will continue. The larger war is for adults to manage until you are not 12 and half conscious in a hospital bed. It is protection. It is also a wall. Harry nods, but something inside him sets like cooling steel. They are choosing what to tell him. They are choosing what to hide, not out of malice, but out of fear and strategy and old guilt that has nothing to do with him. He makes a choice of his own. If there are pieces of Voldemort in the world, if his mind can be breached, if even Dumbledore and Snape are speaking in half-truths, then survival is not just about obedience, it is about understanding. He will find out what they are not saying. Not to rebel, not to prove himself, but because the next time the dark touches his mind, he intends to be ready. This is that story. Summer at Spinner's End, debriefing a near death. Spinner's End is waiting for him. The river stinks of factory smoke, the brick row houses lean in close, and the narrow sitting room that once felt like the whole world now feels small, dim. Harry has seen moving staircases and enchanted ceilings, and a lake full of secrets. Yet when the wards slide over his skin as he steps through Snape's door, something in his chest unlocks. After a year of trolls, chessboards, and the boy who lived almost dying again, small and dim is not the worst thing. Snape says nothing at first. His trunk thumps into the corner. The door shuts with a precise click. The silence between them is not empty. It is coiled, gathering. Harry can hear the clock in the kitchen, the distant rush of the river, the faint creak of the floorboard under Snape's boots as he turns. Sit. One word. Soft. Deadly. Harry sits. The lecture does not explode. It unspools. Snape's voice is low, controlled, each syllable cut through the grief like a knife. Unauthorized exploration. Deliberate disobedience. A list of near-fatal idiocies delivered with a spy's vocabulary and a parent's fury. Why did you not come to me? Did you imagine yourself invincible? Did you intend to make Lily's death meaningless? That last question lands. Harry flinches. For the first time, he hears what is underneath the anger. Not just contempt for James. Not just the old war in Snape's eyes. Fear. A terror so sharp it almost shakes his hands, though his face never cracks. I didn't want him to get it, Harry mutters. The stone. Voldemort. Snape freezes at the name, then gestures abrupt. From the beginning, every detail. You will not spare me anything you remember. So Harry tells him the trapdoor, the devil's snare, the keys. Ron on the chessboard, Hermione's fire, the mirror. Quirrell's stutter peeling away, Voldemort's voice sliding through the room, through Harry's mind. The burning touch, the blackness closing in. He speaks faster as he goes, as if outrunning the image of that pale, ruined face. Snape listens without interruption. His eyes are unreadable, but his questions are not. Precisely when did the voice enter your thoughts? Did it feel external, or as if it rose from within? What did he say about the stone, about your mother, about Dumbledore? Not the questions of a teacher doing damage control, the questions of a man, mapping an enemy he has already betrayed once. What if he had managed to stay in your mind? Snape asks at last. Would you know? I don't know. Something in Snape's expression fractures. Just for a heartbeat. You must never answer that again, he says quietly. We will ensure the answer is yes. There is a pause. The night everything changed hangs between them. A prophecy overheard, carried to Voldemort, Lily dead on a nursery floor. Harry doesn't know the details, but he feels the weight. Snape almost speaks. Harry can see it, the words pressed against his teeth. My fault, my choice. Instead, Snape's mouth thins. Your mind is vulnerable, he says. The Dark Lord, if he returns, will exploit that. We begin Occlumency tomorrow. Basic shields first, then deeper work. You will also resume your dueling drills. The Ministry will not keep you safe. Dumbledore will not always be at your shoulder. You will be prepared, or you will be dead. The summer settles into a brutal rhythm. Mornings over cauldrons, brewing potions far beyond the Hogwarts first-year syllabus. Afternoons in the cramped yard, wands flashing. Snape's curses pulling no punches. Evenings in the sitting room, Harry's thoughts laid bare and slowly, painfully, taught to close. They never say, out loud, that they are training for Voldemort. They do not need to, because in this narrow house by the river, a new war is already being planned, and the next time a voice presses against Harry's mind, he will not be alone when he answers, but whose strategy will win when Dumbledore finally realizes what Snape is building here. Second year, same chamber, different Harry. Second year begins with whispers, not wonder. The walls bleed words. The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the air, beware. The scarlet letters cut through the grief like a knife. But for this Harry, raised in a Slytherin's house, they are not just a threat. They are a thesis statement. Someone is invoking Salazar, weaponizing an old ideology he has actually read about in Snape's cramped sitting room. Pages spread between chipped mugs of tea. What if the boy who lived walked into that corridor already knowing that Heir of Slytherin is not just a spooky title, but a political claim? A banner in a war over blood and power, not a ghost story scratched on stone. Hermione stands at his side, quill already scratching. She asks questions in rapid fire. Who benefits from fear of Slytherin? How many times has the Ministry used ancient rites as an excuse to do nothing? Harry answers in the language Snape taught him. Old family alliances, sacred 28 feuds, which parents at Hogwarts' high table would secretly nod along with the message, and which would flinch. This is that story. When the dueling club spirals into chaos, and the snake hits the floor. Everything changes in a breath. The hiss leaves Harry's mouth before he can think, instinctive, low, soothing. The serpent stills, the room does not. In canon, horror. Here, calculation rides alongside the shock. Parcel tongue. A rare gift, dark by association, older than any ministry edict. In Snape's house, that word came with footnotes, not fairy tales. Harry hears the gasps, sees the way eyes flick to his house badge, to his scar, to the message on the wall. He does not ask, "What did I say?" He asks quietly, "How will they use this?" That night, in the library's shadowed corner, Hermione lays out books on magical linguistics, while Harry sketches the prophet's inevitable headlines. Dark legacy of the Potter boy. Is the heir among us? They build a counter-narrative in ink and strategy, listing witnesses, rehearsing what he will say if Dumbledore calls him in, if the Board of Governors whispers expulsion. Snape plays his part. In the Great Hall, his eyes are shards of onyx, voice soft and cutting as he suggests that perhaps Potter should be removed from the dueling platform. In staff meetings, he lets suspicion curl around Harry's name just enough to be believed. Behind closed doors, it is different. "You will not wander alone," he snaps, warding their quarters a second, then a third time. "You will not investigate. You will not make yourself a symbol for either side of this idiocy." His hands shake only once, when he thinks Harry is not looking. He pressures Dumbledore with quiet venom. More patrols, tighter curfews, actual Auror presence, not just Hagrid and hope. When he finds Harry near the second-floor corridor one evening, his intervention is almost casual, a hand on the boy's shoulder steering him away, voice silken with rebuke and something that is not quite fear. Hermione notices the patterns, the way Snape's detentions always end just before another attack, the way he redirects Harry from staircases that later end in petrified bodies. She files it away, another variable in an increasingly intricate equation. Together, she and Harry work the problem methodically. Basilisks in folklore, pipes in castle schematics, ghosts who died in bathrooms no one uses. They cross-reference Myrtle's year of death with the last time the chamber was opened, trace plumbing lines on stolen blueprints, argue over whether a 1,000-year-old monster could live on rats and fear. And that is how they end up here, outside a damp, echoing lavatory that smells of mildew and stale despair. Facing a cracked sink, Hermione has already marked with 3 separate runic annotations. "Last chance to pretend we're oblivious," she whispers. Harry thinks of Sirius, of Remus, of the night everything changed in another version of this war he will never know. He thinks of Snape's warning, of Dumbledore's secrets, of a school built on bones and stories. Then he places his hand on the porcelain and hisses a single word, fully aware of what may answer. The sink begins to move. They are not walking into legend blind. They are descending into it with their eyes open and a plan. Down in the chamber, basilisk, diary, and dark magic theory. The sink grinds aside and the pipe yawns open, cold air rushing up like the breath of a grave. For most second years, this would be the moment terror takes over. For the boy who lived raised in Severus Snape's house, it's the moment training takes over. Harry checks Hermione's eyes. No panic, just calculation. "Helm charms," she says. "Already moving. Their wands trace tight, practiced circles, layering translucent shields over their faces. Not simple bubblehead charms. Snape drilled those apart and rebuilt them. These are refractive veils, tuned to scatter direct gaze. They add a secondary film over their glasses, a distortion that will make any reflected eyes a blur. Line of sight only, Harry murmurs, repeating the rule that has been hammered into him since Snape first mentioned the word basilisk, in a voice that cut through the grief like a knife. We control angles, we control distance. From his satchel he pulls vials, each labeled in Snape's precise hand. Blasting solution, coagulating draught, emergency anti-venom brewed from shed basilisk skin, and a recipe Snape refused to explain beyond a flat, "You will carry this. You will not argue." What if this is the night everything changed again? Snape had thought, and refused to say. The slide down is a blur of stone and damp and adrenaline. They hit the floor in a practiced roll, wands out, masks shimmering. They move as they've been taught, back to back, sweeping the chamber in arcs, never allowing an unseen angle. The diary lies near Ginny, black and small and humming. Harry feels it before he touches it, not the simple, sickly tug of a cursed object. This is different. It feels hungry. His dark magic theory lessons flare in his mind. Parasite constructs, anchored malice, soul tether experiments the Ministry buried after the First War. He doesn't know the word Horcrux, not yet, but he knows this is not just a book. It's a wound that refuses to close. When Riddle rises from the pages, he's almost beautiful. Clean edges, smooth voice, eyes bright with curiosity. Canon Tom would have met a bewildered child. Instead, he meets a boy who has spent evenings arguing magical ethics with a man who once bore the dark mark. Riddle tries the obvious first. "You're tired, Harry. Let me see. Let me help." His voice slides in, oily, reaching for Harry's mind. Occlumency walls slam up. Not perfect, not Snape's razor palisades, but solid. Harry feels the pressure, the probing, and beneath it, something fractured. Riddle's presence isn't singular. It stutters, echoing as if part of him is missing and screaming from far away. Images flash, half stolen, half repelled. A boy in an orphanage, a man splitting his soul, rituals that leave the air warped. Harry staggers, but he holds. Riddle's smile thins. The basilisk comes at the whistle, all scale and ancient fury. But Harry has read about serpent behavior at Snape's insistence. He knows heat patterns, strike range, the blind spot beneath the jaw. He hisses commands in parcel tongue, not to befriend, but to distract, to misdirect. Blasting solution arcs through the air, shattering against the ceiling in a concussive roar that showers stone onto the serpent's eyes. Not a killing blow, a tactical one. The beast thrashes, half-blinded, its gaze weapon blunted. Fawkes still comes. The sword still finds Harry's hand. But when steel meets scale, it's the final move of a plan, not a desperate miracle. After, bloody and shaking, Harry doesn't destroy the diary with blind faith. He drives the fang through with intent, yes, but he feels the way the magic screams, the way the room seems to exhale as the parasite dies. He catalogues every sensation, every echo of Riddle's warped soul. When he hands the ruined book to Dumbledore hours later, his voice is steady. "This wasn't just a cursed object," he says. "It was a fragment." He doesn't know yet what that fragment means, but he knows there will be more. And as Dumbledore's eyes flicker, fear, recognition, calculation, Harry realizes something else. Snape has not been preparing him for school. He's been preparing him for a war. So what happens when the boy who lived starts hunting the pieces of a dead man who won't stay dead? Trussed on a knife's edge, Harry, Snape, and Dumbledore after the chamber. The office feels smaller. The diary sits in the center of Dumbledore's desk, black and dead and wrong, a burned hole through its middle. Fawkes watches from his perch, feathers fluffed, eyes too knowing. What if this is the moment all three of them realize the war never ended? Harry's voice is steady as he finishes the story. The pipes, Ginny, the basilisk's scream, the sword in his hand. He doesn't rush. He doesn't dramatize. He just lays it out, each detail precise, the way Snape has drilled into him. Across from him, Snape stands rigid, robes still faintly dusted with stone powder from the chamber, eyes fixed on the diary like it might leap. Dumbledore listens, hands steepled, face calm. But his blue eyes, they are not calm. They are on the diary, and the terror there is quiet and absolute. "Headmaster," Snape says at last, voice low. "This is not a cursed object. It was a vessel. It behaved as if a mind were trapped within, a fragment. The word hangs there heavy. Of him. Of Voldemort," Harry says, refusing the euphemism. "Of the dead man who won't stay dead." He leans forward. He's 12, but the question in his eyes is older. "Professor, is this how he survived the night everything changed?" Dumbledore's gaze flickers to him. "What do you mean, Harry?" "I mean," Harry presses, "is this how Voldemort stayed alive after Godric's Hollow? Are there more things like this? Because this is twice now. Quirrell in first year, this diary in second. Why do I keep running into pieces of him at school?" There it is, respect, but sharpened. The boy who lived, suddenly aware that surviving makes him bait. Dumbledore exhales, the sound old. Some magics are best left unexplored in youth. Youth is when they keep trying to kill me. Pattern interrupt. Snape actually huffs, the closest thing to a laugh Harry has ever heard from him in public. It dies quickly, but the corner of his mouth had moved. Snape turns on Dumbledore. He is not wrong. The words cut through the grief like a knife. If the Dark Lord has devised methods to anchor himself, and if those methods are being smuggled into Hogwarts, then ignorance is not protection. It is liability. Dumbledore's eyes narrow. "Severus, you asked me to prepare him," Snape says, soft and vicious. "Occlumency, defense, disciplined casting. You knew this was not a story that ends with exams and house cups. If he is to be hunted, he must understand what hunts him. Anger and a strange, cold gratitude mixing. Snape is still infuriating, still harsh. But in this, he is on Harry's side. This diary, Harry insists, was a piece of him, wasn't it? If there are more, I want to know. I deserve to know. It's my life you're gambling with." Dumbledore closes his eyes for a heartbeat. When he opens them, the fear is banked, but not gone. There are theories I am not yet ready to confirm. Magic so foul it should never have been conceived. I will tell you more, Harry. In time. Time keeps trying to kill him, Snape murmurs. But he doesn't argue further. Not here. Dumbledore rises. The audience dismissed with a gentle, infuriating, "You have both done extraordinarily well. Rest now. Recover. We will speak again." Harry stands. Snape moves with him, a dark shadow at his side. Neither bows, neither quite trusts. They leave together, the door closing behind them with a soft click that feels like a choice. In the corridor, they walk in silence. Harry's mind races with questions Dumbledore would not answer. Snape's mind runs to older, darker knowledge he swore never to share with a child. Between them, something brittle forms. Not friendship, not yet, but an alliance, edged and fragile, between a boy who wants truth and a man who knows truth can kill. This is that story. 3rd year without the Dursleys, Dementors and no Patronus yet. Summer does not begin with bars on a bedroom window. It begins with a slammed door at the end of term, and Snape's clipped trunk. Now, as the boy who lived follows him down into the dungeons, not back to Privet Drive, not back to people who are dead to him in every way that matters. Spinner's End is narrow and dim, but it is not the Dursleys. There is no Aunt March to insult his parents, no Dudley to chase him, no cupboard to be locked in. There is structure, chores at precise times, reading lists that would make Hermione Granger weep with envy, wand drills until his wrist aches, and, threaded through it all, Occlumency, Snape's cool voice teaching Harry how to wall off memories, how to take the night everything changed and fold it into a silent, unreachable box. Sometimes, as a concession, there are outings, not to theme parks or beaches, to Diagon Alley under a heavy glamour, Snape's hand on his shoulder, his voice a low warning in Harry's ear. Do not wander. Do not speak your name. The war is not over. The Ministry is complacent. Voldemort is dead, but his ideas are not. Harry watches the leaky cauldron bustle around them and feels like a ghost in his own story. By September, he has not blown up any aunts. He has not run away. He has, however, learned to keep his face blank when nightmares claw at him. Snape calls it discipline, survival, choice. On the Hogwarts Express, that discipline shatters. The train judders to a halt. The lamps flicker. Cold pours in, not the chill of Scotland, but something deeper, older, that seems to seep through glass and bone. Harry's hand goes automatically to his wand. Across from him, in the staff compartment, Snape goes still in a way Harry has learned to fear. The door slides open. The Dementor's presence hits first. A pressure, a sucking, a wrongness. Harry feels his carefully built walls tremble. Occlumency has always been about pushing things down, compressing them until they cannot move. The Dementor does not respect that architecture. It rips. Lily's scream tears through his head, not memory as a distant echo, but as if the night everything changed is happening again, now, in this narrow corridor. James shouting, Voldemort's high, cold laugh, and then something worse. A flash of Snape's own horror, his plea to Dumbledore, the moment he realized what his information had done. Their fragile mental bond, forged through occlumency lessons, becomes a conduit for shared terror. Harry chokes, collapsing. He is not just reliving trauma, he is feeling it fully for the first time, unmuted, unfiltered, every emotion he has been trained to bury flooding him at once. Who is he without those walls? What if the identity Snape built for him, controlled, contained, weaponized, is exactly what the Dementors are devouring? Snape drives the creature back with a spell that is not quite a Patronus and not quite dark, his face white and drawn. Uncharacteristic urgency replaces his usual sneer. By the time they reach the castle, he is already in Dumbledore's office, cloak still damp from the storm, voice low and lethal. They will not board the train again, and Harry will learn to defend himself properly. Not next year. Not in theory. Now, what if the Patronus, the spell that saved the boy who lived in another timeline, refuses to come when his feelings are locked away? In the dungeons, night after night, Snape explains the charm with clinical precision. Happy memory, focus, will. Harry obeys. He thinks of flying, of small moments of almost kindness, of a half smile on Snape's face he might have imagined. Silver mist sputters from his wand and dies. Again, again, again. Snape's frustration crackles in the air. "You are holding back," he snaps. But beneath the anger, Harry hears something else. Fear. Not of Voldemort this time. Not of the Ministry, but of a threat he cannot outthink or outplan for the child he chose to protect. Harry's arm trembles. The mist fades. For the first time, he understands. Discipline alone will not save him from creatures that feed on feelings he has never been allowed to fully feel. So what does he loosen? What does he risk? And what will that choice change when the Dementors are no longer outside the walls, but waiting for him on the battlefield still to come? Lupin's classroom. A different kind of teacher, a different kind of threat. Harry finds the answer in the next classroom. Remus Lupin stands at the front, robes frayed, case scuffed, wand tucked behind his ear as if he forgot it was there. He looks more like a tired uncle than a warrior. Yet when he speaks, the room steadies. Fear, he tells them, is not an enemy to crush, but a messenger to listen to. The boy who lived has never heard an adult say that out loud. Lupin's voice is gentle, but it cuts through the grief like a knife. He names the Dementors for what they are. He explains why the Ministry uses them, how war twists choices until monsters seem practical. He does it without condescension, without that sharp defensive edge Snape wears like a second cloak. Harry watches him demonstrate the ridiculous charm and thinks he makes terror look survivable. And then Lupin says James's name. Not in a sneer, not as a warning, as a memory. He laughs, quietly, about James falling off his broom in 5th year because he was showing off for a girl who was already in love with someone else. He mentions Lily's temper, her precision in charms, the way she would drag Remus and Sirius out of the library when they forgot to eat. It is the first time Harry has heard his parents spoken of as young and stupid and alive. Something in him lurches. Snape speaks of Lily rarely, and when he does, it is carved down to sainthood and sacrifice. The night everything changed, frozen in amber. James is almost never mentioned at all, except as a cautionary tale. But Lupin's eyes soften when he looks at Harry, and in that look there is recognition and horror. Remus sees Lily's eyes, James's posture, and Severus's stillness all fused into one adolescent frame. The set of Harry's shoulders when he is bracing for criticism, the way his hand tightens on his wand, then relaxes by will alone. Occlumency habits in a 13-year-old. What if this is the cost of Severus's vow? What if protecting Harry has meant teaching him to live half submerged, forever managing, never spilling? After class, Lupin keeps him back. His questions are simple, but they land hard. How are the Dementors affecting you? What do you hear? Has anyone taught you grounding, not just shielding? Harry fumbles through answers. Lupin doesn't flinch at talk of screaming or cold or wanting to disappear. He gives Harry language, panic, dissociation, trauma. Words Snape has always translated into one command: control. It is a different kind of defense. Not against curses, against collapse. Snape notices the shift immediately. Harry's Patronus practice changes. His spell work loosens, paradoxically stronger for it. In staff meetings, Severus's objections to Lupin's methods are framed as pedagogy, but the edges are old and poisoned. Remus argues that Harry must learn to feel in order to fight. Severus counters that feeling is how Voldemort will break him. The war they never finished at 17 reignites in lesson plans and corridor glances. Harry stands in the crossfire. Two men who loved his parents in utterly different ways, both certain they know what he must become. Lupin mentions the Marauders and goes quiet when Harry doesn't recognize the name. Snape forbids questions about old-school friends with a finality that feels less like protection and more like fear. So what else has been edited? What if the story of James the Bully and Lily the Saint is only one angle on a far messier truth? When Lupin, voice low, says, "Your father and Severus were complicated," Harry realizes something shattering. Snape has not told him everything, and Remus Lupin, shabby and kind and dangerous in a completely new way, might hold the missing pieces that could change who Harry believes he is and who he is willing to be. The next time Lupin says, "We need to talk about your parents," Harry goes to that meeting alone. What he hears there will not just challenge Severus's version of the past, it will threaten their fragile present. Werewolves, marauders, and the stories Snape never told. Lupin chooses a Sunday. Grey light, empty classroom, tea cooling untouched between them. It feels less like a chat and more like a summons, and Harry knows, before a word is spoken, that this is one of those conversations that will not let the world go back to what it was. "This is about my dad," Harry says, because naming it is easier than waiting. "It's about all of us," Remus answers. "James, Sirius, Peter, Severus, me." He starts with the easy stories. James transfiguring McGonagall's lectern into a griffin that bowed whenever she said any WTs. Sirius charming the suits of armor to applaud whenever a Slytherin answered a question correctly. Peter trailing behind, laughing too loudly, trying too hard. The boy who lived pictures his father young and golden, wand out, cloak billowing, not in war but in mischief. Then Lupin adds the other pieces. How the pranks sometimes cut through the grief like a knife for students who had already lost parents to Voldemort. How harmless fun blurred into targeted humiliation. How Severus, brilliant and poor and furious, was too often the easiest mark. "What if I told you," Remus says quietly, "that your father could be cruel?" Harry's first reaction is rejection. No, James Potter died fighting Voldemort. James saved him the night everything changed. James is not the villain in Severus's story. But Lupin keeps going. The near-fatal joke, Sirius, reckless and 17, telling Severus how to freeze the Whomping Willow, the tunnel, the werewolf at the end of it. James realizing what had been set in motion and dragging Severus back at the last possible second. He saved Severus's life, Harry says, seizing the one clean fact in the mess. Yes, Remus agrees. but only after his best friend tried to use my condition as a weapon, and only after months of baiting Severus to the edge. Snape upside down, robes over his head, pants exposed, a ring of students jeering while James lounges with his wand out, and a grin that is all performance. Harry feels sick, not because he believes Lupin is lying, but because Severus never showed him this, never said the words. He let Harry absorb the contempt, the muttered, arrogant, strutting James Potter, without ever laying out the crime. "Why didn't he tell me?" Harry demands. Remus's eyes are tired. Maybe he thought it would be using you. Maybe he wanted you to hate James on your own. That answer does not help. The confrontation with Severus is inevitable. Harry waits until evening, until the dungeons are all echo and shadow. His words come out sharper than he intends. "You told me my father was arrogant," he says. "You didn't tell me you almost died because of him, or that he saved you, or that you spent years hexing each other senseless. You left out half the story." Snape goes very still. Cold fury tightens every line of his face, but beneath it, Harry sees something rawer, something that looks too much like fear. "Do you require a catalogue of every humiliation I endured?" Severus asks. "Would that make your hero more palatable? Or are you here to defend James Potter's honor, now that you know he was not a saint but a bully who occasionally felt remorse?" "I'm here," Harry fires back, "because you made me hate him, without ever giving me the choice to know him." The word hangs between them. Choice. In this war, in this house, in this fragile guardianship built on Lily's ghost, for what it is worth, Severus says at last, voice low, "Raising you has never been about James. A beat. It has been about a promise I broke, and a woman who is dead because of me." Harry realizes, with a jolt, that maybe Severus is not just protecting him. Maybe he is punishing himself every day by waking up to James's eyes in Lily's face. That night, Harry climbs to the astronomy tower alone. The grounds stretch out in silver and black, the forbidden forest a dark bruise at the edge of the world. Wind tears at his robes. He thinks of the marauders, of Severus, of Dumbledore, of Sirius dead in this timeline long before they could speak. How many of them believed they were different from the generation before, and how many repeated the same patterns anyway? What if he is already doing it, carrying Severus's bitterness, Lupin's guilt, James's recklessness in his bones? This is that story, not just of alternate guardianship, but of whether a boy raised in the wreckage of other people's choices can make different ones. Up on the tower, the boy who lived stares into the dark and asks himself the only question that matters. Does he have to become their echo, or can he break the cycle before the next war truly begins? The Shrieking Shack, rewritten, no Dursley baggage, same explosive truths. Down in the Shrieking Shack, the night everything changed tightens into a single room. Splintered beams, dust in the air, the smell of old fear in the rotting wood. 3 adults, 3 pasts, and one boy who lived standing between them with his wand steady and his occlumency shields locked tight. Sirius is all sharp bones and wild eyes, pointing at Ron's trembling rat. Remus is pale, the wolfsbane still dulling the worst of the hunger, but not the guilt. And then the door slams open, and Snape is there, black robes snapping, expression carved from 20 years of war and regret. In canon, this is a child's chaos. Here, Harry is not that child. Snape's ward has spent years learning to read micro-expressions, to feel lies scrape against the surface of his mind. He has brewed wolfsbane beside Remus, listened to Sirius's stories about Peter until the patterns cut through the grief like a knife. What if all of that training collides in this one suffocating moment? Enough! Harry's voice cracks across the room before any stunning spells fly. No one moves, no one casts. You talk, slowly. Snape's wand is already leveled at Sirius's heart. Step aside, Potter. Old reflex, old hatred, except Harry hears the strain under it. The man who rocked him through nightmares is breathing too fast. Evidence, Harry snaps. All of you. Now, or I walk out and let the Ministry sort your corpses. There is dry bite in it. He has heard Snape threaten worse over mislabeled ingredients. Remus flinches first. The map, Severus. The Animagi records. Ask Minerva. Ask Legilimens, Harry whispers. Not at Remus, not at Sirius, but at Snape. A brush, nothing invasive, just enough to test. They practiced this. Consent. Resistance. Truth. Snape's eyes widen. Then, deliberately, he drops his shields a fraction. Harry sees flashes. James and Sirius laughing, Peter small and eager, Lily dead on a cottage floor, Snape on his knees in Dumbledore's office begging, and threaded through it, a conviction Sirius Black is guilty. He breaks the contact and turns it on Sirius with the same ruthless fairness. Remus watches shaken. This is not the boy Dumbledore thought he was shaping. In Sirius's mind, everything is the same, up to the street, the explosion, the laughter. But the guilt is wrong. It is grief, self-loathing, not triumph. And Peter's face weeping, wand behind his back, is the pivot. The truth about Peter Pettigrew doesn't just clear Sirius, it detonates Snape. Because in that instant, Harry understands. The man Snape has hated, the ghost he has punished in Harry's eyes and hair, was never the traitor. Peter was. Peter, who chose survival over friendship, who handed Lily to Voldemort and left both Snape and James dead in different ways. Snape's wand hand trembles. You expect me to believe, after Azkaban, after 13 years, his voice fractures. Lupin, you knew there was a chance. You said nothing. Remus swallows. Dumbledore. Do not, Snape hisses, hide behind him. The promise he made in that office wars with the hatred burning his veins. Protect the boy, destroy the marauders. Serve the plan. Again, always. Listen to me. His magic hums, the room's dust shivering. Peter is the one who betrayed them. He made you all victims and then walked away. You can kill each other, or you can help me stop him. They still fail. Peter slips through their fingers into the dark teeth bared in a coward's grin. But before the shack empties, Harry forces them to face him. Vow something, all of you. You stop using me to fight your old war, or when I come of age, I walk away from every one of you. I don't care what Dumbledore planned. Sirius's eyes clear. Remus's shoulders straighten. Snape's jaw locks. One by one they swear. And above them, in a castle full of secrets, someone else is listening, already recalculating how to use a boy who has just refused to be a pawn. 4th year. A strategist enters the tournament. The great hall is a storm held together by stone. Candles shiver, students roar, professors stand in a ring of firelight around a single blue-white flame. The goblet spits out a 4th name. Harry Potter, For a heartbeat, the boy who lived is 14 again, not the strategist who made that threat in the kitchen. Shock hits first. Cold, then the training Sirius and Remus drilled into his bones slams down over the panic. Who benefits? Who gains if I die in a sanctioned accident? If I win? If I lose publicly? His mind moves faster than his pulse. Voldemort is not dead. They all know that now. A binding magical contract is a perfect leash. The Ministry is full of enemies who would rather see him broken than leading any future war. Dumbledore's expression, troubled, calculating, tells its own story. Was this incompetence or a choice? Harry walks to the front, not as a boy dragged, but as a piece placed. He notes every wand hand, every whisper, every Slytherin smirk and wide-eyed Hufflepuff stare. If this is a trap, he will map it. Down in the antechamber, the moment the door closes, Dumbledore begins his measured questions. In this timeline, he does not slam Harry into a trophy case. He doesn't have to. Snape gets there first. "Explain to me," Severus says, voice silk over steel, "how a 14-year-old who did not enter his name is now bound to a tournament designed to kill grown wizards. The fury is controlled, but it is nuclear." It reminds Dumbledore of the night everything changed, of a young man with Lily's blood on his hands demanding protection for her child. This anger could cut through the grief like a knife. "Severus, allowing him to compete," Snape hisses, stepping closer, "is tantamount to handing Voldemort a loaded wand. You know the Dark Lord is moving. You know the Ministry is compromised. And yet you suggest we supervise." McGonagall flinches. Karkaroff pales. Moody watches, amused. Harry files away every reaction. What if this entire scene is being staged for him? He meets Snape's eyes. There is a question there. "Do you want me pulled out, whatever the cost?" Harry answers with a tiny shake of his head. This is a battlefield. Walking away now only hands it to the enemy. So he treats each task as a mission. Research, preparation, execution. The dragon, Hermione builds them a schedule. Harry breaks the arena down into zones of cover and fire lanes. He drills evasive flight with a precision that makes even Madame Hooch blink. A quiet Slytherin 6th year with a talent for illusion charms, not who respects competence more than blood, offers a suggestion about false targets. Harry listens. The lake? He studies merfolk lore and gillyweed side effects, then designs contingencies for sabotage. Hermione runs simulations in the room of requirement. Slytherin beaters time him against currents, trading dry, sharp jokes about not drowning the school's best hope against Voldemort. By the time of the first task, Hogwarts has changed. Instead of a reluctant, flailing champion, they see a calm operator. Harry walks into the arena with his wand steady, jaw set, eyes scanning for patterns rather than glory. When he outmaneuvers the dragon with ruthless efficiency, minimal show, maximum control, the stands fall silent before they cheer. Admiration follows. So does suspicion. How long has he been training for war? Who is really shaping him? Dumbledore, or the reformed marauders, or the man in black at the staff table whose gaze never leaves him? Up in the shadows, moody Barty Crouch Jr. watches with predatory satisfaction. This version of Harry Potter is not a fluke of luck, but a forged weapon. Breaking him will be exquisite. Recruiting him, that would win the whole story. Graveyard of plans. A different boy faces the Dark Lord reborn. The cup gleamed on its plinth, too perfect, too convenient. Harry's skin prickled. Snape's voice, sharp as a wand-tip, ran through his mind. Objects do not become prizes simply because adults say so. They become traps. So when his fingers closed around the Triwizard Cup with Cedric's, he wasn't thinking victory, he was bracing for impact. The world ripped sideways. He had just enough time, in that sickening lurch, to slam his Occlumency shields up, to lock his thoughts behind the iron doors Snape had made him build. Then his feet hit cold earth. The smell hit next, damp, old stone, cut grass, and the heavy sweetness of decay. A graveyard. His stomach turned as his eyes adjusted. Headstones, angels, names. Potter, James Potter. The night everything changed was carved in lichen and dates. That personal sting cut through the grief like a knife. Of all places, of course Voldemort would drag him here. The bundle in the shadows, the high, cold voice, the hissing command to Wormtail. Harry's trained eyes catalogued everything. Cauldron, bone of the father unknowingly given, flesh of the servant willingly sacrificed, blood of the enemy forcibly taken. War magic, old, structured, ritualistic. What if this was how the boy who lived was meant to die all along? When the knife sliced his arm and his blood sizzled into the potion, Harry wasn't just screaming. He was calculating. Blood, wards, protections. Dumbledore had spoken of Lily's sacrifice as if it were a shield woven into Harry's very skin. Snape had been blunter. Magic in blood is leverage. If Voldemort drank that leverage, what changed? What doors opened? What protections died? The answer rose with the steam. Voldemort's new body unfolded from the cauldron, pale and terrible. Red eyes met green, and pressure slammed into Harry's mind. A shove, a hook, an invitation to drown. He refused. Occlumency wasn't elegant now. It was survival. He pictured the dungeon office, the crackling fireplace, Snape's relentless stare. Focus, breathe, wall. Again, Voldemort's monologue washed over him. Lectures on power, on destiny, on the ministry and its weakness, but the words skittered off the smooth surface of Harry's shields. Where Canon Harry might have been dragged under, this Harry held his ground. Frustration twisted Voldemort's face. The mental pressure eased. The Cruciatus came instead. Pain obliterated thought, but even there Snape's training whispered, "Survive the interval. Count the breaths. Do not give him your mind." When the Death Eaters formed their circle and the duel began, Harry moved. Not well enough, but better. He dove behind headstones, used obelisks as cover, snapped off stunners, shield charms, even a textbook-perfect disarming hex that made Voldemort's wand hand twitch. For a heartbeat, the Dark Lord actually looked surprised. It didn't last. Raw power and decades of experience crushed technique. Spells Harry had only seen in Snape's restricted grimoires tore the ground open. Shattered stone drove him to his knees. Still, he lasted longer, made Voldemort work for it. Then, twin jets of green and red met in mid-air. The connection locked their wands together. A blazing thread of gold. Harry felt it at once. Not just a freak accident, but a resonance. Twin cores, shared history, a flaw in Voldemort's invincibility, a weakness, a weapon. As the ghostly figures emerged, his mother, his father, others whose names were written on tombstones around them, Harry understood something chilling. This was not the end of the story. This was a map. He fled with Cedric's dead weight and the echoes of his parents' voices in his ears, the graveyard spinning away. Somewhere between one grave and the next, a new question took root. If their wands could do this, what else could be turned against the Dark Lord reborn? War councils and wards, the Order reacts to a different Harry. Hogwarts did not sleep that night. Stone and Shadow held their breath. Harry sat in Dumbledore's office with a blanket over his shoulders, and graveyard dirt still under his nails. His hands did not shake, his voice did not break. When he spoke, it was not as the boy who lived, but as a field report. "Voldemort is fully corporeal," he said, meeting Dumbledore's eyes, then Snape's, human body, snake-like features. Dependent on Nagini for protection, he favors tight circles, controlled fields of fire, and he's still obsessed with theatrical entrances. He listed Death Eaters by name, wand hands, favored curses, the way Lucius shifted his stance when the Dark Lord passed, the way the Lestranges thrilled at pain. He described the tug of the portkey, the feel of the Cruciatus, the exact timing between Voldemort's monologue and the command to kill. McGonagall looked ill. "You were counting?" "Yes," Harry answered. "You can't dodge what you don't map." That sentence cut through the grief like a knife. Some of the Order members gathered along the walls. Shacklebolt, Moody, a younger Tonks, watched him with open respect. This was not the sheltered child Dumbledore had once imagined hiding behind blood wards. This was a trained asset, a weapon who analyzed his own torture. And that, for others, was the horror. "What have you done to him?" Molly Weasley's whisper was almost worse than a shout. Her gaze snapped from Snape to Dumbledore. "He's a child, Albus. Severus. This is war talk." Snape's jaw clenched. Dumbledore's fingers steepled, blue eyes unreadable. "What if," Molly went on, "the price of preparing him is that you turned him into the thing you're fighting?" Pattern interrupt. No prophecy, no wand law, just a mother's accusation hanging in the air. Snape spoke first. "He is alive because he was prepared." His tone was smooth, but Harry heard the crack under it. "The Dark Lord will not be defeated by ignorance and sentiment." Yet when the meeting broke, and the portraits pretended to sleep, Snape's dual role closed in like a vice. He would have to return to Voldemort to sell a story in which Harry was not a disciplined, independent operator, but a boy molded by his professor, a controllable instrument, a prize to be stolen, not an enemy to be feared. "Emphasize your influence over him," Dumbledore said quietly. "Voldemort must believe you are shaping the boy who lived." "And in reality?" Snape asked. "In reality," Dumbledore answered, "we harden his mind until possession breaks on it." So the next war councils changed. Harry did not sit in the corridor anymore. He took a chair at the edge of the table. Not to lead, to listen. "If you're going to risk me," he said once, when Moody grumbled, "I get to understand the risk. That's the choice you made when you trained me." They argued. They relented. Piece by piece, Harry learned how the Ministry would deny, how Fudge would flail, how public fear could be turned against Voldemort, or against him. Later, at Spinner's End, the world shrank to peeling wallpaper and the hum of the river. Snape set a thin, leather-bound volume between them. No title, no author. "Hypothetical magic," he said. Soul magic. Suppose a wizard feared death so much he tore himself apart to avoid it. What protections would such a man rely on? Harry's stomach turned. You're not talking about simple anchors. Nothing about this is simple. Snape's eyes were dark, distant. There are objects that bind a man to earth long after his body is dead. We will not name them yet. We will only learn how to recognize the fingerprints. He spoke of fragments, of corrupted artifacts, of magic that screamed if you listened closely enough. And Harry understood, with a chill, that full ignorance was no longer an option. This is that story. Not of a boy stumbling blind into the night everything changed, but of a young soldier sitting in a rotting sitting room, being armed with truths that might kill him or save everyone else. 5th year, without Umbridge's total victory. Umbridge arrives in a cloud of pink and poison. Harry watches her simper through the feast, that little cough puncturing Dumbledore's words, and feels it cut through the grief like a knife. Not just for Cedric. For the boy who lived, who is being publicly called a liar by his own government. What if the real war isn't wands in the dark, but decrees on parchment and smiles with too many teeth? He doesn't explode. Not this Harry. Sirius and Remus drilled self-control into his bones, and Snap, of all people, has honed it into a weapon. So when she calls him into her office, when the kitten plates watch and the quill bites his skin, he does not shout. He catalogues the questions she asks, the phrases she repeats, the way she flinches at Voldemort's name but hides it behind disdain. He walks out of that room bleeding and already planning. Not rebellion, counterintelligence. Snape reads the scars on Harry's hand with one glance in potions, a muscle ticking in his jaw. He says nothing. Publicly he is unchanged, greasy, cold, vicious with his barbs. When Umbridge inspects his lesson, he lets her prattle about theoretical safety until a cauldron hisses. Then his voice slices across the dungeon. Detention, Mr. Corner, for failing to follow basic instructions. In my classroom, we do not rely on pamphlets written by people who have never brewed a day in their lives. It is open defiance wrapped in academic arrogance. She cannot quite challenge it without admitting she has no idea what he's talking about. In the weeks that follow, students notice a pattern. Those she targets hardest never walk alone in the corridors below ground. Slytherins with no love for Gryffindors still step in, citing Snape's orders. Detentions are quietly swapped. Schedules rearranged. The worst of her punishments intercepted by a man who pretends not to care. Dumbledore's army is never called that. Harry and Hermione would rather not paint a target on the headmaster's back. Instead, it's study groups and dueling drills. Small cells rotating locations, everyone drilled in Occlumency basics and need-to-know rules that would make any Auror proud. Lupin's old lessons on Boggarts and Patronuses become case studies. Snape's brutal critiques of Harry's shield work turn into drills that the group repeats until their arms shake. This is not a club. It's a training cell in a school that pretends the war is dead. But the real battleground is the dim office where Occlumency lessons take place. Snape drives Harry without mercy. Memory after memory is ripped open, slammed aside. Sirius laughing in the kitchen. Remus handing him a mug of chocolate after a nightmare. The night everything changed at the graveyard, Cedric's body hitting the ground again and again. Pathetic, Snape snarls, even when Harry is shaking. Do you want Voldemort in your head? Do you want him to see them? Harry hates him in those moments. hates the sneer, the contempt, the way Snape seems to take pleasure in every flinch. He storms out after one especially vicious session, vision blurred, chest burning. Then he stops, because he remembers something that shouldn't be there. Not his own memory, but a flash that slipped through when the connection faltered. Snape white-faced before Dumbledore. Snape on his knees, promising anything, everything if Lily's child lives. Snape staring at a crib in Spinner's End, hand hovering and then retreating. The terror in those eyes is not for himself. Harry leans against the cold stone, breathing hard, and understands. Snape isn't just afraid of Voldemort discovering his double life. He is terrified of failing the one person whose survival his entire redemption is built on. And Harry realizes, with a chill, that his mind is no longer the only thing at stake. So what happens when the boy who lived decides to protect the man who was never meant to be his father? The Department of Mysteries, a planned ambush, not a rash rescue. He feels it before he sees it. A pressure behind the scar, a cold hook sinking into his mind, dragging his thoughts toward a corridor that smells of dust and old fear. The Department of Mysteries, Sirius on his knees, screaming, Voldemort's voice a silken hiss, "Fetch it for me, boy who lived," or watch him die. Snape's occlumency drills slam up like iron shutters. The pain doesn't stop, but it blunts, as if the hook has to fight through barbed wire. He sees Sirius writhing, hears the crack of a curse, and beneath it, an echo that doesn't fit. The timing of the torches, the angle of the door, the way Voldemort looks straight at him, not at Sirius. Manipulation, not memory. He's shaking when it ends, but he is not running for a Thestral. He is running for Snape. Spinner's End discipline holds even as panic claws at his throat. He reports, not rants. Details, not hysteria. Snape's face goes corpse white, then hardens into something Harry has only seen in war memories. When he takes Harry to Dumbledore, his hand on Harry's shoulder is bruisingly tight. Dumbledore listens in silence. No twinkling eyes, no gentle deflections. When Harry finishes, the headmaster's expression is carved stone. "What if he is both taunting you and testing you?" he murmurs. "We cannot ignore this, but we will not hand him what he wants." This is not the rash charge of canon. This is a controlled intervention. Within an hour, the Order is moving. Kingsley and Tonks for stealth, and Aurora protocol. Moody, because this is exactly the war he was built for. Sirius, because if the vision is real, no one will keep him away. And, after a brutal argument that cuts through the grief like a knife, a small chosen student cell, Harry, Hermione, and one other who can move and think under fire. Hermione arrives with a satchel of prepped potions and a memorized map of Ministry service corridors. Harry comes with DA hand signals, shield rotations, and Snape's voice in his head barking corrections. They do not sneak out under Umbridge's nose. They walk through the flue, under Dumbledore's authority, cloaked and layered in wards. The Hall of Prophecy is not empty, it is waiting. Death Eaters fan out, masks gleaming in the pale blue light. But Harry's group doesn't scatter into chaos. They fall into formations drilled in a hidden classroom and a cold sitting room in Spinner's End. Shield, stun, reposition. Hermione calls vectors, redirecting curses off conjured stone. Harry uses feints Remus taught him, baiting opponents into Moody's line of fire. For a while, it works. They are outnumbered, not outclassed. Then the war remembers it owes them nothing. A curse meant for Harry ricochets off a spinning shelf. Tonks shoves him aside and takes it full in the chest. She hits the marble, eyes wide, and does not get up. Sirius's roar tears the air as surely as any spell. He hurls himself after Bellatrix, reckless, incandescent. They duel on the dais, black hair and black laughter, and 30 years of history. Harry sees the stumble before Sirius does. The veil billows, hungry. Sirius's heel catches stone. Preparation doesn't change gravity. Sirius falls through the arch, hand outstretched, and the world narrows to a silent curtain of tattered fabric. Later, Harry stands amid shattered glass and whispering orbs, the prophecy sphere broken in his bloody palm. The words, half heard, half remembered, mean less than the bodies being levitated away, less than the empty space where Sirius should be swearing at the healers, a weapon or a warning, destiny or excuse. In the echoing ruin of the Department of Mysteries, Harry makes a choice. The future will not be decided by a sentence spoken before he was born. It will be decided by what he and Snape do now. In the aftermath of the night, everything changed. And as Voldemort's scream of frustrated fury shreds the air, Harry realizes something terrifying. The prophecy may be broken, but the war has only just begun. The prophecy laid bare, no more half-truths. The silence after the Department of Mysteries is brittle. It tastes of dust and prophecy and blood. Dumbledore's office is too bright. Sunlight fractures through the windows, catching on silver instruments and the motionless portraits of dead headmasters who pretend to sleep. Harry stands in front of the desk, shoulders squared, wand at his side. He is not throwing things. He is not screaming. That, somehow, scares Dumbledore more. "Start at the beginning," Harry says. His voice is low, precise. No more half-truths. No more later. What exactly did the prophecy say? And what did you do with it? Behind him, Snape stands rigid, black robes a stark line against the wall. He had insisted on being present. Dumbledore had not argued. For a heartbeat, the old man looks very tired. Then he reaches into the pensieve, draws out a swirling thread of memory, and lets it hang in the air between them. Trelawney's harsh, echoing voice fills the office. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord, born as the 7th month, dies, and either must die at the hand of the other, for neither can live while the other survives. Harry listens without flinching. He has heard fragments, hints, the weapon, the power he knows not, but hearing the full thing laid bare, word by word, is different. It feels surgical, as if someone has just drawn the outline of his life on the air and called it destiny. "And you heard this? When?" Harry asks. "I did not," Dumbledore says quietly. "Severus did." Pattern interrupt. Harry turns slowly to Snape. "You?" Snape's face is stone, but his fingers curl once against his sleeve. "I was in the Hog's Head," he says. "I heard enough to interest the Dark Lord. I took what I heard to him. I did not know the whole prophecy. I did not know it would point to Lily." His breath catches almost imperceptibly. "When I understood, I came to Dumbledore. I begged him to save my mother," Harry says. "It is not a question, not my father." Snape does not look away. "I did not care if James Potter died. I cared if she did. That is the measure of the man I was." The admission cuts through the grief like a knife. Harry is horrified by the casual cruelty, by the fact that the boy who lived is standing here because a spy chose which lives mattered. But there is something else, layered beneath the anger, the knowledge of what came after. You then swore to protect me, Harry says. You raised me. You trained me. Was that penance? Penance, Snape says, and punishment. For 15 years I woke every day to James's face and Lily's eyes, to the child marked by words I delivered. I do not ask forgiveness. I do not deserve it. But I could not let you die to complete the circle I began. Dumbledore speaks, voice rough. I believed the prophecy would unfold regardless. I feared telling you would bind you tighter to it. Instead, my secrecy has done the same. What if I had trusted you sooner? Harry exhales, long and slow. You both used me, he says, as a symbol, as a weapon, as a way to ease your own guilt. That's the story, isn't it? He steps closer to the desk. His scar throbs, but for once it feels distant, an old echo rather than a command. Here's what changes now, he says. The prophecy doesn't get to decide who I am. I will fight Voldemort because I choose to, not because some drunk seer said I have to. And while I do, I will hold you both accountable. No more secrets. No more using me without my consent. Snape inclines his head, the motion sharp, almost formal. Dumbledore closes his eyes, as if in benediction or defeat. Outside, the war tightens its grip. Inside this office, the boy who lived makes a different kind of vow. This is that story, what happens when the weapon refuses to be wielded, and starts setting the terms of the next move. 6th year, Horcrux theory and a different half-blood prince. Dumbledore adjusts, because he has to. After that vow in the office, the boy who lived is no longer a child to be steered by half-truths. He is a combatant who has already seen war from the inside of his own mind. What if, Dumbledore thinks, secrecy is now the greater risk? So 6th year begins with a different invitation. Not a mysterious set of private lessons framed as remedial, but a blunt summons. Pensive. Memories. Tom Riddle's cold, brilliant face rippling in silver light. Dumbledore does not circle the point this time. He names it. Horcrux, soul magic so foul it was whispered even in Grindelwald's shadow. Harry does not flinch from the theory. He has grown up in a house where dark magic is not a forbidden word, but a problem to be understood, dismantled, neutralized. He listens as Dumbledore explains soul-splitting and anchors, ritual murder and deliberate maiming of the self. Each sentence lands like a physical blow. The diary, the way it drank Ginny's life, the way it spoke with that smooth, hateful voice, the way Voldemort slid into his scar in 5th year and tried to wear him like a cloak, the cold, oily pressure he has felt his whole life at the edge of his thoughts. Pieces, Harry says, voice flat. He left pieces of himself in us. Not just that his parents are dead, not just that the night everything changed made him an orphan. Voldemort violated him body and soul before he could walk. Understanding that, with Snape's relentless training in mind, arts thrumming behind his occlumency shields, makes his hands shake. Dumbledore sees it. He does not look away. He lays out the plan earlier, the diary destroyed, the ring already taken at terrible cost, the locket suspected, the cup, the snake, something of Ravenclaw's or Gryffindor's. He does not hide the guess that Harry himself may be one more vessel. Harry walks out of that office, not as a pawn, but as a strategist. And he is furious. That fury colors everything, even the battered potions text he picks up in Slughorn's class. In this timeline, there is no long, slow mystery about the half-blood prince. Harry has spent years watching Severus write, marking essays, drafting ward schemes at the kitchen table, annotating old defense grimoires with vicious, precise comments. He opens the book, sees the cramped angular script, the economical arrows and improvements, the contemptuous little idiot beside a standard bizarre instruction, and knows. Of course it's him, he mutters to himself, dry. Who else weaponizes handwriting? Not a secret tutor, but a time capsule. Here is teenage Severus, brilliant and reckless, slicing at instructions, inventing shortcuts that dance on the edge of disaster, spells scrawled in the margins that hum with barely leashed violence, sectum sempra, written almost lovingly, a private masterpiece. Harry feels sick and fascinated in equal measure. He sees the same mind that taught him to break down a curse into component runes, now turned toward cruelty for its own sake. He also sees, in small, grudging corrections, too dangerous, unstable, don't use on living targets, the faintest seeds of restraint before the war and the guilt and the choice to protect a child he never wanted. The emotional fallout is brutal. Every detention, every snapped insult from first and second year, reframed through the lens of a boy who once delighted in making power bleed. Every quiet, careful lesson at Spinner's End, reframed as penance. Harry does not let it fester. One night, he slams the book down on Snape's desk at Prince Manor, the old name on the flyleaf facing up like an accusation. Half-blood prince, he says. We're done pretending I don't know who you were. For a heartbeat, Harry sees not his guardian, but the teenager from the margins, furious, cornered, aching for someone to understand, and terrified they might. This is that story, the air between them seems to say. The moment when the weapon turns, not on its maker, but on the lies that forged them both. Snape has spent years controlling every revelation. Now the boy he raised knows more about his darkest years than he ever intended. And Harry is waiting for an answer. So what does Severus Snape do when the past he buried pulls up a chair at his own kitchen table and refuses to leave? The Tower Knight, a different witness to Dumbledore's fall. The kitchen at Spinner's End is still in Harry's bones when he steps into Dumbledore's office the night of the cave. The air smells of phoenix feathers and burnt sugar, but all he can hear is Snape's voice from a week ago, low and strained over untouched tea. If the headmaster asks you to obey me, you will do so without question, not a request, a command. And beneath it, the tremor Harry has learned to hear the way other children learned lullabies. On the cliff above the Black Lake, Dumbledore is weaker than Harry has ever seen him. His hand shakes as he raises the goblet. His eyes, though, are steady, calculating. This is war, and the boy who lived is being positioned on the board. What if something happens to you? Harry asks, because Snape has trained him to ask the question that cuts through the grief like a knife. Then you must trust Severus, Dumbledore replies. Not just obey, trust. There are vows upon him you do not yet understand. His choices may appear monstrous. You will remember this conversation and hold your fire. Dumbledore doesn't say unbreakable vow. He doesn't need to. Harry has seen the pale scars around Snape's wrist, the way he rubs them on bad nights, The way he avoids discussing Bellatrix Lestrange with a precision that screams omission rather than ignorance. Hours later, under the invisibility cloak, Harry stands on the astronomy tower, body locked by Dumbledore's spell. He cannot move. He can see everything. Draco's wand shakes. Death Eaters fan out black shapes against the storm. And then Snape appears in the doorway, robes billowing, face carved from stone. Harry watches the details. The micro-tilt of Snape's body, placing himself between Dumbledore and the others. The fractional shake of his head at Draco. The way his eyes, for one raw second, meet Dumbledore's and fill with something that is not hatred and not triumph, but sheer, naked agony. Severus, please. To everyone else, it will sound like a plea for life. Harry hears the other reading, the one Snape drilled into him over years of occlumency and double meanings. Finish it. Every instinct in Harry screams betrayal. This is the night everything changed. Again, his headmaster, dead, his guardian wand raised. Avada Kedavra, roaring green across the gap. But Harry has watched Snape brew antidotes at 3 a.m. with shaking hands. He has seen him return from Voldemort's summons white as parchment, refusing to sit until he has checked Harry's wards himself. He knows masks. He has lived with one. Did Snape finally break under the strain? Or is this the ultimate execution of Dumbledore's strategy? The terrible choice that keeps Harry's role in the war intact and Snape's cover unburned. On the stairs, chasing him through the chaos, Harry's grief is a raw wound, but the hatred that canon demanded will not come. Not cleanly. Not simply. There is a gap where certainty should be, and it terrifies him more than the green light. He does not vow to kill Snape. Not this Harry. Not the boy Snape raised on bitter potions and harsher truths. He makes a different vow. I will find you, Harry whispers into the night, as the castle burns and the Ministry's lies gather strength. I will get the truth, all of it, and then I will decide what you are to me. Enemy, ally, or something far more complicated. Because if Severus Snape has just murdered Albus Dumbledore to keep his promise to Lily's son, what does Harry Potter do with that? This is that story, and the answer is coming. On the run with Snape's training, the Horcrux hunt. They don't wander, they move. Across hedgerows and heathland, the boy who lived and the man who raised him travel like a unit that has trained for this war since the night everything changed. Campsites are not accidents, they are operations. A clearing is never just a clearing. It's a grid to be warded, a perimeter to be mapped, a risk calculation Harry can hear in Snape's old clipped instructions in the back of his skull. Layered protections go up in a rhythm that needs no words. Hermione traces the outer Muggle repelling shell, wand steady. Harry walks the inner ring, layering Homenum Revelio triggers and anti-apparition anchors Snape drilled into him every summer. A silent shielding web shimmers for a heartbeat, then vanishes, tied to a tripline only they can feel. Ron, when he is there, handles the mundane, tent stakes, fire, the battered map. It is not glamorous, it is competent. Snape's influence is everywhere. Potions are racked in shrunken crates, labeled in Hermione's precise hand, blood replenishing, calming, pepper up, even a diluted draught of peace for when the nights are worst. They don't argue about whether to use them. The rules were set years ago. If your hand shakes, you drink. If your mind frays, you stop and brew. War is won by those who last. And Harry is lasting because his mind is a fortress. He sits watch in the small hours, back to a tree, Occlumency walls held like a constant clench. Voldemort presses against his thoughts, a dark tide searching for cracks, for anger, for grief. In 5th year, those visions cut through the grief like a knife and drove him into traps. Now they slide off cold stone. He gives nothing. No corridor, no prophecy room, no name. But the cost, that's new. Every time he slams the door on Voldemort, he slams it on himself. Memories of Sirius falling, of Dumbledore's body on the astronomy tower, of Snape's face as he cast the killing curse. Occlumency keeps him alive. It also keeps him alone. Hermione feels it. She always has. Their partnership, forged in years of shared research at Snape's insistence, is the engine of this hunt. Where Canon Harry stumbled through dead ends, this Harry and Hermione move with frightening efficiency. They decode Riddle's patterns using dark arts texts Snape forgot in the library at Spinner's End. They cross-reference Ministry property records and Black family law. They predict Horcrux sites before they arrive. The locket, retrieved with layered counter-curses and a timed disillusionment field that makes the cave's inferior problem, not a death sentence. The cup, they walk into Gringotts with a polyjuiced plan and an exit route that does not involve a blind dragon and sheer luck. So what if the danger is lower and the competence higher? Does that mean it hurts less? No. It just means the cracks take longer to show. Ron's resentment over being the least trained simmers under every decision. Hermione's frustration at Harry's emotional lockdown grinds against his refusal to talk. Arguments don't explode, they corrode. A snapped comment here, a delayed apology there, all buried under mission briefs and ward schematics. Snape taught Harry to master his temper, not to share his fear. One night, under a sky thin with stars, Harry sits alone on watch. The tent is a quiet lump behind him. Hermione and Ron are finally asleep. His scar throbs, not the stabbing agony of possession, but a tug, an invitation. He lets his occlumency shields thin just enough to feel it. A flash, an old wand in a pale hand, a grave robbed, a legend awakened. The Elder Wand, the Hallows myth Hermione once dismissed and then grudgingly annotated. What if you could end it all with one unbeatable weapon? What if power, just this once, was the safer choice? Snape's voice answers from memory, harsh and tired. Power is never safe, only controlled, only borrowed, never yours. Harry breathes, in, out. He pictures Horcruxes, not Hallows. Tom Riddle's diary. The ring, the locket, the cup, the snake, himself. This is the story I choose, he whispers to the dark. Horcruxes first, Hallows never, unless there's no other way. He pulls the walls of his mind back up, tighter than before, turning from the allure of the Elder Wand to the brutal necessary work ahead. Because in this war, raised by Severus Snape, the boy who lived is not chasing legends. He is hunting anchors, and he knows with a cold, clear certainty that the final one is already beating in his own chest. The prince's memories. A son watches his father figure die. The certainty that the final anchor beats in his own chest follows Harry into the shrieking shack like a physical weight. The air is thick with dust and the copper sting of blood. This is not the night everything changed. This is the night everything breaks. Snape is already on the floor when Harry bursts in, Nagini's venom burning black through torn robes. His wand lies a few feet away. Useless. Blood pools beneath him, seeping between warped floorboards that once heard Sirius and Remus and Peter shout accusations and truths. History echoes here. So does the war. Harry drops to his knees. Dad. The word is raw, automatic. Not Professor, not Snape. Dad. The boy who lived has been raised to control his voice, his breathing, his magic. All of that discipline shatters in one syllable. Snape's hand twitches, reaching for his wand, not for Harry. Even dying, instinct is strategy. Potter. Get out, he rasps, eyes flicking to the shadows. Still hunting for threats, still shielding the son he never meant to have. Heal. Come back. Harry ignores him. What if obedience here means losing the only parent he remembers tucking him in after nightmares about Voldemort? He's already uncorking vials from his belt, hands shaking, mind rifling through years of lessons at Prince Manor and in the Hogwarts dungeons. Blood replenishing, anti-venin, episky. His spells fire off in tight, practiced bursts, the way Sirius drilled him, the way Remus taught him to keep his voice steady under pressure. The magic hits Snape's chest and fizzles. Nagini's poison fights back, oily and stubborn. Harry swears under his breath, dry and hoarse. Of course, it couldn't be a normal snake. The grip is iron. Listen. The word cuts through the grief like a knife. Vials. Take them. His other hand, slick with blood, fumbles at his robes, drawing out the crystal files already primed with silvery threads. Harry shakes his head, tears blurring his vision. No, we're not doing this. I can fix. Harry. The name lands heavy. No title, no sneer. Just a man who has run out of time. This is the choice. You finish the war. You end him. You hear me? When the memories pour into him, they are not neat sequences. They are impact. A cupboard in Spinner's End. Tobias's fist slamming into a wall inches from a boy's head. Lily laughing by the river. Severus at 16. Mark burning into his arm. Telling himself this is power. This is how he'll never be helpless again. Dumbledore's office, the night everything changed for him. Hide them, all of them, he begs. Just her. Then, Godric's Hollow in smoke and ruin. Snape cradling Lily's dead body, the same arms that later held a feverish toddler through dragonpox, that guided Harry's wand through his first successful Protego. Quiet acts of protection layered over years. Extra wards on Prince Manor when rumors of Death Eaters resurface. Secret meetings with the Ministry. Occlumency drills that leave them both exhausted but alive. Harry staggers, one hand braced on the rotting floor, the other still caught in Snape's. He understands, finally, that raising him was penance and punishment, and something much more dangerous. Love, twisted through guilt, but love all the same. He realizes he is losing a parent and a shield in the same breath. Snape's chest stutters. His eyes, always guarded, are unmasked for once. Look at me, he whispers. Not for Lily's ghost this time, but for the living boy in front of him. Harry does. He holds that gaze until it goes unfocused, until the harsh lines of Snape's face soften into stillness. He reaches up with shaking fingers and closes his father's eyes. The shack is silent except for his breathing. "I'll finish it," Harry whispers, voice wrecked. "Not just for her, for you. I'll end this war the right way." Outside, the castle groans under the strain of battle. Inside, the boy who lived stands, carrying a dead man's memories and a new, terrifying certainty. Because buried in those memories is something Dumbledore never told him. And it changes everything. The final battle, a Slytherin-trained hero, changes the war. Harry does not stumble back into Hogwarts. He enters it like a commander returning to a contested fortress, eyes tracking sightlines, choke points, and the way fear moves through a crowd. The Great Hall is a war room now. Instead of shouting over one another, students fall quiet as he speaks, voice low but carrying. He does not make a speech about glory. He makes assignments. Ravenclaws to the towers, reinforcing wards and setting up signal charms. Hufflepuffs to the infirmary, and supply lines because loyalty and endurance will keep people breathing. Slytherins, his Slytherins, to the shadows and stairwells, running misinformation, sabotage, and extraction. Gryffindors to the front lines, but in rotating squads, not doomed charges. This is not the boy who lived improvising on instinct. This is a Slytherin-trained strategist using the DA network like a web. Patronus messengers, relay points, fallback corridors. He moves through the castle with Snape's clipped precision, Remus's mapmaker's brain, and a question burning in every order he gives. How many can we keep alive this time? In the quiet between impacts of curses on stone, he closes his eyes and breathes. Occlumency walls slide into place, cool and absolute. For years, Voldemort's presence in his mind was an injury. Tonight, it's a weapon. What if he stops trying to shut it out and starts shaping what Voldemort sees? He lets flashes slip through the cracks on purpose, a glimpse of the room of requirement bristling with protections it does not actually hold. A fleeting image of Hagrid's hut sheltering something precious. Enough to make Voldemort furious. Enough to make him divide his forces, overextend, drag his giants and werewolves into killing fields Harry has already warded. And mined with cursed runes, Snape made him practice until his hands shook. And when Voldemort snarls in his mind about the folly of resisting, Harry thinks very clearly about Horcruxes, about cups and diadems and snakes, about protections already stripped away. He feels the Dark Lord's attention snag on the thought of the last safeguard, the one bound up with the Elder Wand, and he knows the bait is taken. The forest walk still comes. It has to. The path is the same. The boy is not. Each step is measured, not in fear, but in cost. Snape's voice walks with him. Every lesson about death as the other side of magic, about endings being as structured as any spell. Dumbledore framed sacrifice as love. Snape framed it as arithmetic. Tonight, Harry holds both. He knows, with a clarity that almost hurts, exactly what his death will buy. Voldemort's borrowed protection torn free, the tether inside his own scar, severed one final shield thrown over everyone still fighting in that castle. He thinks of Sirius's laugh, of Remus's tired smile, of Lily's eyes in the Pensieve, and of Snape broken and bleeding on a boathouse floor. The grief had cut through the grief like a knife. Now there is only a quiet, terrifying peace. "I forgive you," he whispers into the trees, not as absolution, but as acknowledgement. Snape was never built for sainthood. He was built for hard, ugly choices. This is Harry's. The killing curse hits. The world ends. Then it does not. When he returns to the castle and steps into the final circle, the Great Hall holds its breath. This is not a fluke of twin cores anymore. This is that story, the one where preparation meets prophecy. Harry faces Voldemort with 2 lifetimes of instruction behind him. Dumbledore's theory, Snape's brutality, spell chains snap from his wand in ruthless sequence, shield, severing, displacement, a feint toward legilimency that makes Voldemort overcommit, trying to crush Harry's mind the way he's done to 100 others. But Harry's mind is a fortress now. Occlumency slams the door in his face. The brief recoil is all he needs. He taunts Voldemort with the truth, not as a desperate monologue, but as a scalpel. The Elder Wand's allegiance. The broken line of murders. The way magic itself has turned against this half-dead thing clinging to it. Each word is chosen to enrage, to push Voldemort into the one spell he trusts above all others. Avada Kedavra meets Expelliarmus in a clash that is not chance but design. Harry has maneuvered him here, to this wand, this moment, this hall. When the body falls, it is almost ordinary. Dust hangs in the air with the smell of spent magic. Broken banners, shattered tables. The dead and the living tangled together in the aftermath of a war that should have ended years ago. Harry stands in the center of it, chest heaving, eyes distant. In his right hand is his own wand. In his left, Snape's, black, elegant, scuffed from a lifetime of misuse, and finally, redemption. Gryffindor courage, Slytherin cunning. 2 wands, one choice that changed everything on the night everything changed. And for the first time, the castle feels like it might belong to him. But what does a weapon do when the war is over? After the war, Harry Potter, son of Severus Snape. The war ends with a whimper, not a bang. Months later, Hogwarts breathes in slow, careful lungfuls, as if afraid the castle itself might shatter if it exhales too fast. Stone once scorched by curses is smooth again, veined with faint silver where magic stitched it back together. New portraits hang beside old ones. Order members, students, even a small, tight-lipped frame of Severus Snape over the staff table, forever pretending he isn't listening. Harry walks back through the front doors, not as a student, not as the boy who lived, but as something stranger. A guest lecturer. A consultant. A man Dumbledore's old colleagues now ask to help rewrite the defense curriculum so that no child ever walks into a war unprepared again. He stands in the Great Hall, addressing a sea of younger faces. When they ask about Snape, they expect a simple story. Villain turned hero, monster revealed as saint. Easy, clean, marketable for the Ministry's new memorial pamphlets. Harry refuses. He was a spy, he says, voice steady. He was also a bully. He saved my life more times than I can count. He hurt me more than anyone who was supposed to protect me ever should have. All of that is true at once. The words cut through the grief like a knife, because they don't offer comfort, only honesty. What if that's the real legacy? Not redemption without cost, but truth without varnish. When the speeches are over, when the applause fades, he apparates to Spinner's End. The little street is unchanged. The war could have passed it by entirely. Inside, dust lies thick over threadbare furniture. But his steps are sure. This was home before Prince Manor ever opened its ancient doors to him. In the cramped sitting room, he finds a box wedged behind a bookcase. Old lesson plans, margins crowded with bitter notes about dunderheads and dungeons, and, tucked between them, unsent letters. To Dumbledore, to Lily, one half-finished to Harry himself. You are not him, it begins. You are not James. At Prince Manor, in a study that once smelled of potions and regret, he uncovers other relics. A toy broom shrunk and hidden in a drawer. A stack of essays Harry wrote at 11, meticulously marked, the harsh red ink softened by a single tiny check mark beside the word brilliant. Hermione visits often. She understands the layers in a way few others can. Over tea in that shadowed library, they argue about policy, about how to force the Ministry to confront the next Voldemort before he's born. When she squeezes his shoulder and says, "He did love you," in his way, Harry can finally answer, "I know," without flinching. Years later, with children of his own racing through those same halls, he chooses warmth where Severus chose distance. But he keeps the honesty. He tells them the world is dangerous, that heroes are flawed, that Lily and James were brave and brilliant, and also young and foolish, and that their best friend once nearly got a boy killed for a joke. He does not hide the worst nights, the shouting, the occlumency lessons that felt like warfare, the way love can be twisted by grief until it becomes a weapon. One evening alone in the study, he pours a measure of fire whiskey into 2 glasses, one for himself, one he sets in front of the empty chair behind the desk. "This is that story," he murmurs, raising his glass in a private toast. "Mum made me the boy who lived. But you," he glances at Snape's wand on the desk, at the unsent letters now carefully folded and kept. "You made me the man who ended the war." He drinks. The house is quiet. The choice, as always, is his. But what does a man built by 2 ghosts do with the peace they bought him? What this AU proves: chosen family, preparation and redemption. Peace is the real counterfactual, isn't it? War is loud, simple. It's the quiet after that exposes what the boy who lived has actually been built from. In this AU, everything turns on one almost bureaucratic decision: guardianship. Not a cupboard under the stairs, but a narrow house in Spinner's End. Not casual cruelty, but austere protection. That single brittle choice, Dumbledore backing Snape instead of Petunia, replaces neglect with structure, and the ripple is brutal. Hogwarts politics tilt when Harry walks in already fluent in potions theory and occlumency drills. Ministry strategy shifts when Snape's reports are no longer abstract. They're written by a man who has to come home to the weapon the minister keeps discussing. Even Voldemort's downfall is changed, because the boy he marked as his equal has been trained for war by the man who once delivered the prophecy that doomed him. What if that's the central thesis of this story? Not that love has to be soft, but that consistent, if imperfect, preparation, plus a jagged form of chosen family, can turn a reactive survivor into a proactive strategist. Harry isn't stumbling through the night, everything changed again and again. He's dissecting it, memorizing mistakes, building contingencies. Snape doesn't hug him through nightmares, but he teaches him to shield his mind so the nightmares don't own him. It's ugly, sometimes unfair, but it is support, the kind that leaves scars and skills in equal measure. For Snape, the arc is a slow, grinding redemption. He begins as a man embalmed in regret and obsession, guarding Lily's memory more fiercely than Harry's actual life. Every lesson is a penance. Every restriction is a whispered, "Not again." Through the act of raising Harry, he is forced to look straight at his own darkness, the bigotry he swallowed, the Death Eater he was, the spy he became. Protecting Lily's son stops being an abstract vow to Dumbledore and turns into packing lunches, warding bedrooms, arguing with the headmaster about how much danger is acceptable. He dies in this AU, not as a man still clutching at a dead girl's forgiveness, but as someone who finally, definitively, protected what he once endangered. Harry's arc bends the other way. Canon Harry is shaped to be a weapon, and only later insists on being a person. This Harry is forged as a weapon from the start, and chooses, stubbornly, to be a person anyway. He knows prophecy, knows the Ministry's expectations, knows that Snape's training could make him the perfect asset for either side. He refuses to let that erase his agency. He still walks into the forest. He still chooses sacrifice, but he does it on his own terms, with his eyes open, armed with strategy instead of blind faith. Seen through this lens, canon isn't overwritten. It's thrown into sharper relief. The Blood Wards, the Dursleys, Dumbledore's distance, those become one possible answer to the question of how you protect a cursed child. Snape's guardianship is another. Both stories are about love, sacrifice, and choice. This is that story's quiet claim, that who stands beside you when the grief cuts through the grief like a knife matters as much as the magic in your skin. And if a single guardianship form can rewrite a war, what else in this world was always one hard choice away from changing? If Snape took him home, imagining the next stories, so picture this. The night everything changed does not end with a baby on a Privet Drive doorstep and a cat watching from a wall. Instead, in a narrow, soot-streaked street by the river, the door to Spinner's End bangs open, and Severus Snape steps in from the rain, black robes dripping, arms full of the boy who lived. The house smells of damp stone and old books. The gas lamp flickers. His boots leave muddy prints on warped floorboards as he crosses to the sagging sofa. He doesn't look at the photographs he doesn't have, the family he never built. He looks only at Harry. He sets down not just a child, but the first fragile piece of a future that should have been dead with Lily and James, and isn't. From that image, every scene we know is quietly, ruthlessly rewritten. At the sorting, this Harry sits under the hat with Occlumency scars already forming, with Snape's dry voice in his head saying, "Think, choose." Does he still beg for Gryffindor? Or does he, for once, listen when someone explains what Slytherin really is? What if the emerald ties at the table belong to the hero of this war instead of its villains? In the graveyard, when Voldemort rises, and the wands lock, this is not a boy flailing on instinct. This is a duelist drilled in Spinner's End parlors, a child who learned dark magic theory from the man who taught Death Eaters and then betrayed them. Does he still stand alone? Or does a shadow step from the trees, Severus's wand already raised because he refused, years ago, to leave his son to die in someone else's plan? On the astronomy tower, the choice that once cut through the grief like a knife is altered at its root. A Harry who has watched Snape brew wolfsbane for Remus in secret, who has heard the full ugly truth about Peter and the prophecy, reads that wand tip differently. Does he disarm? Does he shield? Does he trust? Or does he, for the first time, refuse to let Dumbledore script another man's death? And if this Harry changes, who else is dragged into his orbit? What happens to Draco when his snide potions professor arrives at Hogwarts with a ward he clearly infuriatingly loves? Does Ginny still see a reckless savior or a sharp, guarded Slytherin who teaches her hexes in empty classrooms? Do the Weasleys welcome Snape's boy to the Burrow, or does Molly have to unlearn every story the Ministry ever whispered about Death Eaters and traitors? That's where you come in. Which of these moments would you stretch into a full chapter or a whole fanfic? The Spinner's End childhood lessons, a Slytherin common room where Harry and Draco argue over what cunning should mean in a just war, a final duel where father and son stand back to back against Voldemort. Tell me in the comments, what if you were handed this version of first year, or fourth, or seventh? What's the scene you'd write first, and whose arc would you twist hardest? If you want more long-form dives into timelines that hinge on a single guardianship, a single house, a single hard choice, make sure you're subscribed. We've already walked through Sirius and Remus rebuilding a home from Grimmauld Place. Next, we're asking what happens if the boy who lived grows up a Malfoy instead. Same war, new father, entirely different battlefield. Are you ready to see how far one adoption can really go?